Welcome back, everyone. It is your local tiger librarian, Vexen Cat. We are returning to the Count of Monte Cristo, but before we get into that, I wanted to show this incredible art by Ink Moon Arts. She's working on some new projects for in the future, and they made this for me. Isn't it so cute? So little chibi Vex, little preview. I'll probably post about this in the next couple of days. But anyway, so little blurb. We are on The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. We are going to chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes. Just a real quick recap. The previous 7 chapters we have established who Edmond Dantes is, our main character, who his love interest is, Mercedes, who his father is, Dantes Senior, his mentor is Monsieur, can't think of the name at the second, who owns the shipyard, and then we've got our villain characters, Fernand. Then we have the Corso, um, Rousseau, I believe, Corso, who is his neighbor who he lent money to, and then we have Danglars, which is the purser or the money handler that was working on the boat when the previous Captain Leclerc died, who now, because of Edmund's imprisonment, is now the acting captain for their boat. So, in a nutshell, a couple of bad people. De Villefort was like the acting judicial figure at the time. Previously burned the letter from Elba that was from Napoleon to his father that Dantes was carrying, and said, I'll take care of everything. And taking care of everything was not get him executed and have greater scrutiny. Instead, he sent him to prison at the, I guess, the Castle d'If, which is a fortress that's surrounded by water. So political prisoners tend to be really bad off because they want to keep them alive, but they don't want to make sure that they're happy about it. So he's now been imprisoned, and in his furor and anger, he threatened the gaoler that was there, and now he's being thrown in with the other madmen because madmen must be put with other madmen, quote unquote. Yeah. Welcome in, Monoma. Let me say hello to everybody that is here. We've got Almontes, Deus, Hawk, Galactic Mickey, Horo the Wise. I hope you're enjoying your drinks. Lucy Cat. Oh, hi, Lucy. And ICAC, I think. I'm not familiar with the name. Valis is here. I know they'll be streaming later if you're not already. Well, thank you for the follow. If you're not already familiar with Valis's VT's plight, he is doing a fundraiser for housing for him and his daughter. So I have linked and pinned in chat the link to his coffee if you're feeling generous and you would like to help this wonderful man who is the DM for the ongoing D&D campaign. Feel free to throw a dollar or two his way. Yes, first time chatter, Galactic Mickey, welcome in. We will continue where we left off with chapter 8. Chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes. As we have said, Villefort hastened back to the Rue du Grand Cours, and on entering the house of Madame de Saint-Méran, found the guests he had left at table seated in the salon at their coffee. Renee, with the rest of the company, was anxiously awaiting him, and he was received with a universal fire of exclamations. "Hello, Decapitator, guardian of the state, Brutus," said one. "Tell us your news." "Are we threatened with a new reign of terror?" asked another. "Has the Corsican ogre broken loose?"
Scissors Runner
Oh.
just rated for 35 viewers.
Oh dear. Scissor Runner! Oh, Sabrina, welcome in! Hello! Hey, everybody. I am thoroughly...
Winry_Pendragon
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your community with me. For those of you not familiar with Scissor Runner is probably one of the most talented artists in the biz. What were you doing today? You were streaming some art. Ooh, I love my little blurb it gives me. Let's see. It gives me so Scissor Runner is an Italian VTuber and V artist. They explore various themes including fantasy, horror, and Warhammer, and it looks like you were crafting overlays and enjoying video games. Fantastic. Was it more art today? I hope it went well. If you guys aren't already following Scissor Runner, I 10 of 10 would recommend. Super chill, wonderful, amazing voice actor. I don't know. How can I be a librarian if I support pineapple on pizza? It's not all pizza. Hawaiian pizza is pineapple and Canadian bacon. Why it exists, I don't know, but it tastes delicious. My cat Belle. Oh, okay. Drawing a scene that happened during the Warhammer live action role play I went to this weekend. Ooh. I just did a quick recap, but so Edmund has been sent to prison, and de Villefort is going back to his own wedding feast, and that's where we're at right now. So Fernand has taken Mercedes back home. The wedding party for Edmund Dantes has been completely I want to say dispatched, but that's not the word. Disbanded because it was invented in Canada. The powers that be are stirring something. Double, toil and trouble. Yes. Yeah, it's not all pizza. Like my favorite go-to pizza is a chicken bacon ranch. So I like no red sauce, ranch instead, chicken, bacon, ranch. It's a solid pizza. I get it maybe twice, 3 times a year. Pizza's not normally part of my diet, but it's something I think about occasionally. We did raid. Oh, and Lasada's here. Wonderful. No. There's other things that I rather enjoy. Pozole, a number of various salads. I love fish. I'm a big sushi fan. Oui, Alexander Dumas, 18th century. Pretty neat guy. It's very sad that he passed away at 68, though. And the man ran through money like a fish through water. Well, it's like Alexander or Alexander, depending on pronunciation. Sushi and filet mignon. I don't think I would ever have those two together, but fair. Yes. All right, back to the story. We're about to start chapter 8 and find out more about Villefort and Mercedes. Alley-oop. Oh, I totally forgot. Raiders, hello, my name is Vexing Cat. I am a tiger librarian VTuber. I read classic literature, ta-da, and poetry occasionally, and games when collab. Feel free to sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Yeah, I did. I did. It's just, I'm so excited to see Sabrina. She's an absolute delight. Um, just wicked talented. I forgore. Today I ran really, really ragged all the way up until stream. Um, and I was in an interesting, engaged debate about politics, and my brain is elsewhere, and it needs to be here on story time. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate that. I I love the way you draw, and I'm glad that you enjoy the way I read. So we will continue where I left off. Scissor Runner, hydrate, caffeinate, do whatever you need to relax and enjoy the story, and we'll continue on where we stay around for the voice. Wonderful name, by the
As
way.
Daster 37 just
I will
followed.
not be saying it out loud, but I appreciate it nonetheless. One day I'll have a brain and there will be signs. Fair enough. And Brazen Bard, my goodness.
Bard just followed.
So many new friends. Welcome to my library. I hope you enjoy the stories. I'll start from the top again. Chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes. As we have said, Villefort hastened back to the Rue du Grand Cours, and on entering the house of Madame de Saint Méran, found the guests he had left at table seated in the salon at their coffee. Renee, with the rest of the company, was anxiously awaiting him, and he was received with a universal fire of exclamations. "Hello, Decapitator! Guardian of the state, Brutus," said one. "Tell us your news." "Are we threatened with a new reign of terror?" asked another. "Has the Corsican ogre broken loose?" cried a third. "Marquis," Villefort said, advancing toward his future mother-in-law, "I have come to ask you kindly to excuse my abrupt departure." "Monsieur le Marquis? Monsieur le Marquis, would you honor me with a few moments' private conversation?" Thank you for the head pats. And thank you for the follow.
Aleatorism just followed.
Oh, that's what the drop shallow means. Fair enough. "Is it really so serious as all that?" the Marquis asked, noticing the dark cloud that had gathered on Villefort's brow. "It is so serious that I must take leave of you for a few days." "You are going away?" Renee cried, unable to conceal the emotion she felt at this unexpected news. "Alas, mademoiselle, I am obliged to do so." "Where are you going?" the Marquis asked. "That is a state secret, madame, but if you have any commissions for Paris, a friend of mine is going there tonight." Everyone looked at him. "You wish to speak to me?" asked the Marquis. "Yes, let us go into your study." "Have a good night's rest." The Marquis took Villefort's arm, and they left the room together. "Well, and what has happened?" "An affair which I consider to be of a very grave nature, and which necessitates my immediate departure for Paris. Will you give me a letter to the king?" "To the king? But I dare not take... But I... Okay. But I dare not take upon myself to write to His Majesty." "I do not ask you to write the letter. I want you to ask Monsieur de Salvieux, I think. Oh, by the way, if it wasn't already obvious, I do not speak French, but I'll do my best. Monsieur de Salvieux to do so. He must give me a letter which will enable me to gain His Majesty's presence without all the formalities attendant on the request, for an audience which would only lose precious time. If it is so urgent, my dear Villefort, go and pack your things, and I will make de Salville write the letter. Do not lose any time. I must start in a quarter of an hour. So saying, Villefort ran out, but at the door he bethought himself that the sight of the deputy of the Procureur du Roi running through the streets would be enough to disturb the general peace of the town. So he resumed his ordinary magisterial pace. Welcome in, Sloth. You're fine. At his door he perceived in the shadow a white spectre waiting for him, erect and motionless. It was Mercedes. Having no news of Edmund, she had come in person to inquire the reason of her lover's arrest. As Villefort drew near, she moved from the wall against which she had been leaning and barred his way. Dantès had spoken to the deputy of his betrothed, and he now recognized her at once. He was astonished at her beauty and dignity, and when she asked him what had become of him whom she loved, he felt as though he were the culprit and she his judge. "The man you speak of," he said abruptly, "is a criminal, and I can do nothing for him." A great sob escaped Mercédès' lips, and when Villefort tried to pass by, she again stopped him. A great sob escaped Mercédès' lips, and when Villefort tried to pass by, she again stopped him. "But tell me at least where he is," she said, "so that I may learn whether he is alive or dead." "I know not," was the answer. "He has passed out of my hands." Embarrassed by the straight look she gave him, as also by her entreaties, he pushed by her and entered his house, locking the door after him as though to shut out all sadness. But sadness is not banished so easily. Like the wounded hero of Virgil, in Aeneas, hero of Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, 1st century BC. I'm not familiar with that. I'm going to write that down. That would be a good poem to follow up this stream. Well, not this stream, but this book, shall we say. I wonder if there's any correlation to the Iliad. Now to find a pen. "7,000 colored pencils, but never one pen when I need one." When in Rome. Oh, huzzah! How fortuitous. I found a pink pen at the bottom of my colored pencils. That worked out. Aeneas. Virgil. Poem. The Aeneid. Alright, I'll have to check that out later. Anyway, I digress. Like the wounded hero of Virgil, he carried the arrow in his wound. He had no sooner entered his room than his legs gave way under him. He heaved a deep sigh, which was more like a sob, and sank into his chair. For a moment the man was in doubt. He had often passed sentence of death, but the condemned men who owed their execution to his crushing eloquence had not caused him the slightest compunction, for they had been guilty, or at all events Villefort had believed them to be so. But if at this moment the fair Mercedes had entered and said to him, "In the name of Almighty God, who watches over us and in our judge, give me back my lover," he would have given way, and, in spite of the risk to himself, his icy cold hand would have signed the order for Dante's release. But no voice broke the stillness. The door opened only to admit Villefort's valet, who came to tell him that his carriage was at the door. Poor Mercedes had returned to the Catalans, followed by Fernand. Grief-stricken and desperate, she threw herself on her bed. Fernand, kneeling by her side, took her hand, which she did not attempt to withdraw, and covered it with kisses, but she was oblivious to it all. So passed the night. The lamp went out when the oil was consumed. Mercedes was no more aware of the darkness than she had been of the light. Day broke, but she heeded it not. Grief had made her blind to all but Edmond. M. Morrel did not give up hope. He had learnt of Dante's imprisonment and gone to all his friends and all the influential men of the town, but it was already reported that Dantes had been arrested as a Bonapartist, and since even the most sanguine looked upon any attempt of Napoleon's to remount the throne as impossible, he met with nothing but coldness, fear, or refusals, and returned home in despair. Caderousse was restless and uneasy, but instead of trying to do something to help Dantes, he had shut himself up in his house with 2 bottles of wine. Danglars alone felt no pang of remorse or restlessness. He was even happy. For had he not avenged himself on an enemy and assured for himself the position on board the Pharaon he was in danger of losing? He was one of those calculating men who are born with a pen behind their ears and an inkpot in place of a heart. He went to bed at the usual hour and slept peacefully. Danglars is a piece of bleep. He is the worst of the worst. Yeah. Anyway, we are between chapters, which means I am going to hydrate, because I do a lot of lip flapping while I am reading. Don't forget to stretch. I don't know who is worse. Danglars, for being evil and selfish and self-serving and exacerbating the situation. Ah, you got it. Or is it de Villefort? Well, de Villefort is also bad, but he is trying to protect himself. I mean, he is bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to quibble about that. But now he's felt, feeling nothing but guilt. And I feel like that's rough. That is rough. Because at the end of the day, he's actively causing harm to a man he knows is innocent, only to save himself. It seems both better and worse. Like, I can understand the logic behind wanting to save oneself. I can understand that. That's a very human instinct. However, Danglars just hates Dantes because he's well liked, because he's going to get the position because he's a capable man and able to do it, whereas Danglars will butcher it for sure. Danglars is not well liked. He doesn't have a fiance. He doesn't have job prospects. He is a bad man, but he's open in his villainy, and he only hides from Dante's his deepest thoughts, but he doesn't hide his animosity when he's not looking. Thank you for the head pats. I hope you're doing well, Ellen, and I hope Bill the Duck is doing well too. Yeah, they're both bad. Different reasons. Caderousse is complicated. He's not actively doing anything bad, but he knows about everything, but he's not saying anything. Like, so he's not he's not a good friend to Dante's. Like, I understand that Caderousse was owed money and was worried that Dante's Edmund was going to die and then therefore never receive it. I understand that. But then he, basically bankrupted Dante's father while he was away, so endangering his health and well-being. It's true. That that is a that is like a banker's style of evil, as opposed to like outright inciting somebody. It's like, hey, I know you're in love with this woman who doesn't love you, which is what Danglars did to Fernand, actively telling him, it's like, yeah, we should make sure that, Dante's pays for this and then you can have Mercedes. That's active, intentful evil. Whereas like the others were just covetous or saving their own skins. It's just all of them are bad. But I feel like at the end of the day, Caderousse is the least of the four in their evils. Anyway, we are on to chapter 9, and I've talked your ear off about chapter 8. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. Chapter 9, The Little Cabinet of the Tuileries. We will now leave Villefort, traveling with all speed to Paris, and pass into the little cabinet of the Tuileries, which is one of the royal palaces in Paris. With its arched windows, which is so well known as being the favorite cabinet of Napoleon, Louis XVIII, and Louis Philippe. There, seated at a walnut table which he had brought from Hartwell, and to which he was greatly attached, King Louis XVIII was listlessly listening to a gray-haired, well-groomed, aristocratic-looking man of 50 or 52 years of age, and was at the same time making notes on the margin of a volume of Grippius, edition of Horace. Okay. Grippius edition of Horace, which is a Roman poet, apparently. 65 BC. My goodness. An edition full of inaccuracies, but nevertheless much valued. From His Majesty drew many of his wise philosophical observations. What did you say? The king inquired. That I am somewhat harassed, sire. Really? What car king? What carking care is on your mind, my dear Blackus? All right, fair enough. Sire, I have every reason to believe that a storm is brewing in the south. Well, my dear Duke, Louis XVIII replied, I believe that you are misinformed, for I know for certain that the weather is very fine in that quarter. Intellectual as he was, Louis XVIII was very fond of a pleasant jest. He liked puns. Sire, Monsieur de Blacas continued, if only to ease the mind of a faithful servant, could your Majesty not send to Languedoc, Provence, and Dauphine, some trustworthy men who would report on the feeling in these 3 provinces. Canimus surdis. We preach to the deaf in Latin, answered the king, continuing his annotations. Sire, the courtier laughingly replied, as you appear to us understand the hemistich. Oh my god, the languages are all over. We got Latin, we got French. Ah, my goodness. Okay. Sire, the courtier laughingly replied, as you appear to understand the hemistich of the poet of Venusia. A hemistich is a half line of verse. Venusia is the birthplace of Horace. Okay. It is only fitting that your majesty should believe in the good feeling of France. Nevertheless, I do not think I am quite wrong in fearing some desperate attempt. By whom? By Bonaparte, or at any rate his party. My dear Blackus, replied the king, your alarms prevent me from working, and your feeling of security, sire, prevents me from sleeping. Wait. My dear Duke, wait a moment. I have a happy note on Pastor Curum Traheret. When the herdsman carried off, Latin, the reference is the abduction of Helen by Paris in Homer's Iliad. Okay. Read that again. Pastor Curum Traheret. You can continue afterwards. There was a moment's silence during which Louis XVIII wrote in as minute a handwriting as possible, a note on the margin of his Horace, which having finished, he said, rising with the satisfied air of a man who thinks he has an idea of his own, because he has commented on the idea of another. Continue, my dear Duke, I am listening. Sire, Blackus said, for one moment hoping to use Villefort to his own advantage, I must tell you that these are not mere meaningless rumors and idle tales that disquiet me. A man of strong common sense, meriting all my confidence and charged by me to watch over the South. The Duke uttered these last words hesitatingly. Has arrived in all haste to bring me the news that a great danger threatens the king. I came without delay to you, sire. Maleducis avi domum, with an evil omen, also in Latin. Louis XVIII continued, still making his notes. Ah, here is Monsieur d'André. You did say Monsieur d'André? He asked of the chamberlain, who had just announced the minister of police. Yes, sire, Baron d'André. You have just come at the right moment, said Louis. Come in, Baron, and tell the Duke your latest news of Monsieur Bonaparte. Do not conceal anything, no matter how serious. Is the Isle of Elba a volcano from which will issue a bloody, death-bringing war? Bella horrida, bella? War, horrible war. Bella means war in Latin? Today I learned. Bella, horrida, bella. M. d'André balanced himself gracefully on the back of a chair on which he was leaning his hands and said, Hello, Shuttard. Welcome in. Hey, Guts. Welcome in. Monsieur d'André balanced himself gracefully on the back of a chair on which he was leaning his hands and said, Has your Majesty been pleased to peruse yesterday's report? Yes, but give the Duke the contents of the report. Tell him exactly what the usurper is doing on his island. Monsieur, said the Baron to the Duke, all his Majesty's faithful servants have good reason to rejoice at the latest news that has reached us from Elba. Bonaparte. Monsieur d'André looked at Louis, who, busily engaged in writing a note, did not even raise his head. Bonaparte is bored to distraction, continued the Baron. He spends whole days watching his miners at work at Porto Longone. Moreover, we have ascertained that it will not be very long before the usurper is quite insane. His brain is giving way. One moment he is weeping bitterly, the next laughing boisterously. At other times he will spend hours on the shore, throwing pebbles into the water, and if he succeeds in making 5 or 6 ducks and drakes, he is as pleased with himself as if he had won another Marengo or a second Austerlitz, which are apparently 2 of his greatest victories. You must agree with me that these are sure signs of insanity. Or else signs of wisdom, monsieur, smiled Louis. The great captains of olden times amused themselves by casting pebbles into the sea. See Plutarch's Life of Scipio Africanus. Well, Blancus? Well, Blackus? The king continued triumphantly. What do you say to that? I say, sire, that either the minister of police is mistaken or else I am. But as this would be impossible for a minister of police who has the safe custody of your majesty in his keeping, it is probably I who am under a wrong impression. Nevertheless, sire, I would question before your majesty the gentleman of whom I spoke just now. In fact, I beg your majesty to do him this honor. Most willingly, Duke. Under your auspices I will receive whom you will, but I must receive him armed to the teeth. Have you a later report than this one, D'Andre? This one is dated February the 20th, and today is March the 3rd. No, sire. I am expecting one hourly. I have been out since early morning, and it is possible that one has arrived during my absence. Then hie you to your office, and do not forget that I am waiting for you. I go, sire, and shall be gone but 10 minutes. In the meantime, sire, said Monsieur de Blacas, I will fetch my messenger. He has covered 220 leagues in barely 3 days. Which is 220 leagues. A league is about 3 miles, so quick math. 220 times 3, so 660 miles in barely 3 days on, I'm guessing, horseback? Horse and carriage, perhaps. Why all this unnecessary fatigue and anxiety when we have the telegraph? Not the 19th century invention of Samuel F.B. Morse, but so the Morse code, but an earlier relay system involving pivoting arms on posts. Oh, fascinating. Why all this unnecessary fatigue and anxiety when we have the telegraph, which takes but 3 or 4 hours? Ah, sire, that is poor recompense for Monsieur de Villefort, who has come all this distance with such haste to communicate to your majesty some valuable information. Monsieur de Villefort, exclaimed the king, is that the messenger's name? Yes, sire. I thought the name was unknown to your majesty. Not at all, Blackus. He is a serious-minded and intellectual young man, and above all, he is ambitious. Added to that, his father's name is Noirtier. Noirtier the Girondin? Noirtier the senator. The very same. And your majesty has employed the son of such a man? Blackus, my dear friend, you are very slow of understanding. I told you that Villefort was ambitious. He would sacrifice everything to gain his end, even his father. Go and fetch him. When Blackus returned with Villefort, the king said, the Duke of Blackus tells me you have some important information. Give me full details, if you please, and above all, begin at the beginning. I like order in all things. Sire, Villefort answered, I will give your majesty a faithful report. I have come to Paris with all speed to inform your majesty that, in the exercise of my duties, I have discovered a conspiracy, not one of those everyday, meaningless, vulgar plots of the lower classes of our people, but a veritable tempest which threatens your majesty's very throne. Sire, the usurper has manned 3 vessels. He meditates some attack, senseless perhaps, yet it may have terrible consequences.
Comments tab just followed.
Thank you for the follow, comment star. Welcome in. And also, I'm not sure if aleatorium, aleatorium. That's pretty neat. Welcome in and thank you for the follow. Sire, the usurper has manned 3 vessels. He meditates some attack, senseless perhaps, yet it may have terrible consequences. By this time he will have left Elba, bound for I know not whither. He will most probably attempt to land either at Naples or at the coast of Tuscany, or even in France. Your Majesty is aware that the Lord of the Isle of Elba has maintained relations with Italy and France. Yes, monsieur, I know, replied the king, greatly agitated, and lately we have been informed of Bonapartist meetings in the Rue Saint-Jacques. Rue Saint-Jacques. Whence have you your details? Sire, I have them from a man whom I have been watching for some time past, and for whose arrest I gave orders the day before my departure from Marseille. He is a turbulent sailor, whom I suspect of Bonapartism, and he has been secretly to Elba. There he saw the Grand Marshal, who entrusted him with a verbal mission to a Bonapartist in Paris, whose name he would not disclose. The nature of the mission was to prepare the adherents of Bonaparte for a return. Note, sire, these are the man's very words. For a return which must take place very shortly. Where is this man? In prison, sire. Do you think the thing is serious? Sire, I fear it is more than a mere plot. It is a conspiracy. In these days it is easy to plan a conspiracy, the king answered, smiling, but it is difficult to carry it out for the simple reason that, being recently re-established on the throne of our ancestors, we have our eyes at once on the past, the present, and the future. If Bonaparte landed at Naples, the whole coalition would be at his heels before he reached Piombino. If he landed in Tuscany, he would be in a hostile country, whereas if he landed in France, he would have but a handful of men, and we should soon overpower him. At this moment, the Minister of Police entered, pale and trembling, and with a scared look. Dun dun dun. So, we're between chapters, which means hydration. For me and for you. Be sure to stay hydrated, everyone. Or, when you're in your later years of life, as I am, you'll suffer from migraines, from being dehydrated chronically, which is why I'm drinking copious amounts of water. There we go. Don't forget to stretch. Yep, okay, stretch. I'll do that too. As I pop my shoulders in the process. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, close out of this, open this file. Here we go. Okay. We're on to chapter 10. The Ogre. On perceiving the minister's agitated demeanor, Louis violently pushed back the table on which he had been sitting. "Why, Baron," he cried, "what is your trouble? You appear completely upset. Is your agitation in any way connected with the report given by Monsieur Blackus and confirmed by Monsieur de Villefort?" "Sire," stammered the Baron. "Well, go on," replied Louis. The Minister of Police was about to throw himself in despair at the king's feet, but the latter drew back a step and, knitting his brows, said, "Well, are you going to speak? I command you to give me your news." "Sire, the usurper left Elba on February the 28th and disembarked on March the 1st in France, at a little port near Antibes in the Gulf of Juan. The usurper disembarked in France near Antibes in the Gulf of Juan, 250 leagues from Paris on March the 1st, and you only report it to me on March the 3rd. Louis XVIII made a movement of indescribable anger and alarm, and drew himself up straight as if a sudden blow had struck him both mentally and physically. "In France!" he cried. "The usurper is in France. He is marching on Paris." "Sire, I know not. The dispatch only states that he has landed and the route he has taken," was the police minister's answer. "How did you get the dispatch?" The minister bowed his head, while a deep color suffused his cheeks. "By telegraph, sire." Louis XVIII took a step forward and crossed his arms as Napoleon would have done. "So," he said, turning pale with anger, "7 allied armies overthrew that man. A miracle of God placed me on the throne of my fathers after an exile of 25 years, during which time I studied, probed, and analyzed the men and affairs of this France that was promised me, so that when I attained my desires, the power I held in my hand should burst and break me. What our enemies say of us is only too true. We have learnt nothing and forgotten nothing. If I had been betrayed like him, some consolation would be left to me, but to be surrounded by men whom I have raised to high dignities, who were to watch over me with more care than over themselves, who before my time were nothing, and who, when I have gone, will again be nothing, and will probably perish through their own inability and ineptitude. Oh, cruel fate! Oh, I would sooner mount the scaffold of my brother Louis XVI than thus be forced down the steps of the Tuileries by ridicule. You do not know what ridicule is in France. You ought to know, and now, messieurs," he continued, turning toward Monsieur de Blacas and the police minister, "I have no further need of you. The war minister alone can help now." Then suddenly turning to Baron d'André, he asked, "What further news have you in regard to Rue Saint-Jacques' affair?" "Sire," the minister of police replied, "I was about to give your majesty the latest information on the matter when your majesty's attention was attracted towards this other terrible catastrophe. Now these facts will not interest your majesty." "On the contrary, monsieur. On the contrary, it seems to me that this affair may have some direct connection with the other, and the death of General Quinzel will perhaps put us on the direct track of a great internal conspiracy." Villefort shuddered at the name of General Quesnel. General Quesnel. What a name. Shuddered at the name of General Quesnel. "In fact, sire, the minister of police continued, everything goes to show that his death was not due to suicide as was at first believed, but was the work of some assassin. Apparently, General Quesnel left the precincts of a Bonapartist club and disappeared. An unknown man had called on him in the morning and arranged a meeting in the Rue Saint-Jacques. While the minister was telling his story, Villefort, who seemed to hang on his very words, turned alternately red and pale. The king turned to him. Do you not share my opinion, Monsieur de Villefort, that Quesnel, who was believed to be attached to the usurper though he was in reality entirely loyal to me, was the victim of a Bonapartist trap? It is very possible, sire. But you have no further information? The linguistics of my mouth as I speak these words. We are on the track of the man who made the appointment with him. We have his description. He is a man of 50 to 52 years of age. So specific. He is a man of 50 to 52 years of age, has brown hair, dark eyes with bushy eyebrows, and wears a mustache. He was dressed in a blue coat, and in his buttonhole wore the rosette of an officer of the Legion of Honor. Yesterday a man answering to this description was followed, but was lost sight of at the corner of Rue de la Josine? Yeah, I'm guessing. Rue de la Josine and the Rue Coq Heron. Villefort leaned against the back of a chair. His legs seemed to be giving way under him, but when he heard that the unknown man had escaped his pursuers, he breathed again. Seek this man out, said the king to the police minister. For if, as everything leads me to suppose, General Quesnel, who would have been so useful to us now, has been the victim of a murder, I will have his assassins severely punished, be they Bonapartists or not. Bonapartists. There we go. Be they Bonapartists or not, I will not detain you longer, Baron. Monsieur de Villefort, you must be fatigued after your long journey. Go and rest. You are putting up at your father's house, no doubt? Villefort seemed on the point of fainting. No, your majesty, he said. I am staying at the Hotel de Madrid. The Hotel de Madrid in the Rue de Tournon. But you will see him. I think not, sire. Ah, of course, said Louis XVIII, smiling in a manner which showed that all these questions had been put to him with a motive. I was forgetting that you are not on good terms with Monsieur Noirtier. Another sacrifice to the royal cause, for which you shall be recompensed. The king detached the cross of the Legion of Honor, which he usually wore on his blue coat, and giving it to Villefort, said, In the meantime, take this cross. Villefort's eyes filled with tears of joy and pride. He took the cross and kissed it. A man of 50 to 52 years of age is such a small window, right? Like, the phrasing is just kind of unique. It's so specific. I would say, like, in his early 50s means the same thing, but, you know. Anyway, so another between the chapters, we'll probably be able to read one more, and then we'll take a 3 to 5 minute break, and then when we come back, we'll continue on. So the goal today is we're going to try and read through, I think, chapter. Aw. Stretch and hydrate. You got it. So we are going to try and read through. So we started with 8. We just read 9 and 10, and we're on to 11. My goal is to get to chapter 16. We will go to chapter 16 today, which is the cemetery of the Chateau d'If, which is where Edmund is currently enshrouded, imprisoned. That's the word I was looking for. Where Edmond Dantes is currently imprisoned. So we'll go ahead and return to the story. Read one, take a break, come back, read more. Let's see. We are on to... Oh, Oh my gosh, it's Rock. Hey, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a minute. I hope you're doing well. Rock the Mechanizer, everyone. Good man, the Rock. Close out of that. Okay. All right, we are on to chapter 11, The 100 Days. Events followed one another very rapidly. Minis are always a good way to raise one's mood. Video games, minis, painting in general, art, poetry, books. Just saying. For all of you wonderful listeners, I hope you are all reading. It's good for your soul, keeps the brain sharp. Events followed one another very rapidly. Everyone knows the history of the famous return from Elba, a return which, unexampled as it was in the past, will probably remain unimitated in the future. Louis XVIII made but a feeble attempt to parry the blow. The monarchy which he had but ill reconstructed trembled on its insecure foundation, and a wave of the emperor's hand brought down with a crash the whole edifice that was naught but an unsightly mass of ancient prejudices and new ideas. Villefort therefore gained nothing from the king but a gratitude which was not only useless but dangerous at the present time, and the cross of the Legion of Honor, which he had the prudence not to display. Napoleon would, doubtless, have dismissed Villefort but for the protection of Noirtier. Let's see where we go. Napoleon would doubtless have dismissed Villefort but for the protection of Noirtier, who was all powerful at the court of the 100 Days. The Procureur du Roi alone was deprived of his office, being under suspicion of lukewarm support of Bonaparte. Meanwhile, the imperial power had hardly been re-established. The emperor had hardly re-entered the Tuileries and issued his numerous and divergent orders from the little cabinet into which we have introduced our readers, and on the table of which he found Louis XVIII's snuff-box, still open and half full. When the flames of civil war, always smoldering in the south, began to light up in Marseille, and the populace seemed like to indulge in acts of violence against the royalists of the town in place of the shouts and insults which they had hitherto had greeted them whenever they ventured abroad. Indeed. This is the Count of Monte Cristo. If you've not read this story before, it is quite vigorous. Also, welcome in. Villefort retained his post, but his marriage was postponed until happier times. If the emperor remained on the throne, Gerard would require a different alliance, and his father undertook to find this for him. If, on the contrary, a second restoration brought back Louis XVIII, the influence of Monsieur de Saint-Méran and himself would be strengthened, and the marriage would be more suitable than ever. As for Dantes, he remained a prisoner, hidden away in the depths of his dungeon. He was ignorant of the downfall of Louis XVIII's throne and the re-establishment of Napoleon. Twice, during this short revival of the empire, which was called the 100 Days, had Monsieur Morel renewed his appeal for the liberation of Dantes, and each time Villefort had quieted quietened him. And each time Villefort had quieted him with promises and hopes. Finally, there was Waterloo, which was Napoleon's final defeat in 1815. Morel did not present himself before Villefort any more. He realized he had done all that was humanly possible for his young friend, and that to make any further attempts under this second restoration would be to compromise himself unnecessarily. When Louis XVIII remounted the throne, Villefort successfully petitioned for the post of Procureur du Roi at Toulouse, and a fortnight later he married Mademoiselle de Saint-Méran. When Napoleon returned to France, Danglars understood the full significance of the blow he had struck at Dantes. His denunciation had been given some sort of justification, and he called this extraordinary coincidence the hand of Providence. I do enjoy both. But when Napoleon reached Paris, and his voice was once more heard, imperious and powerful, Danglars grew afraid. Dantes might return any day, with full information on the cause of his arrest, and eager for vengeance. He, therefore, informed Monsieur Morel of his desire to leave the merchant service, and obtained a recommendation from him to a Spanish merchant. He went to Madrid, and was heard of no more for a long time. Oh dear. Welcome in, Raiders. Hello. Welcome to my library. Hello, my name is Vexing Cat. I am a Tiger Librarian VTuber. Valis, thank you for sharing your community with me. If you have not been here before, I read classic literature like today and poetry, and occasionally play video games. It looks like you were doing more Balatro today. No, you were playing Berserk or Die. Oh, okay. So it looks like... So if you're not familiar, Valis is my DM for D&D on alternating Saturdays. Our next session will be on the 21st. Let's see here. He is in the middle of a donathon to help raise funds for him and his daughter to find a new place. So I have that link pinned if anyone is feeling generous and wanted to donate to the cause. We would all greatly appreciate it. Valis, if you're not familiar, is an excellent DM and a good friend whom I've known for the better part of a decade. So, good people. Good game. That's a great one, Rock. I hope you're enjoying it. I've seen lots of gameplay. It looks incredible. Not my kind of game, but it looks incredible. So, be sure to take care of yourself, Alice. Yep. Yeah, I can see that would be good after the chaos. All right. Well, we shall return to the chapter of the 100 Days. Fernand, on the other hand, could not understand anything. Dantes was absent. Hi, Kairu. Welcome in. Fernand, on the other hand, could not understand anything. Dantes was absent, and that was all he cared about. What had happened to him? He did not know, neither did he care. In the meantime, the Empire made a last appeal to her soldiers, and every man capable of bearing arms rushed to obey the far-reaching voice of his emperor. Fernand left Mercedes and joined up with the others, but the gloomy and terrible thought preyed upon his mind that Dantes might return now that his back was turned, and marry her whom he loved. His devotion of Mercedes, the pity he pretended to have for her in her sorrow, the care with which he anticipated her least desire, had produced the effect that outward signs of devotion always produce on generous hearts. Mercedes had always been fond of him as a friend, and this affection was now increased by a feeling of gratitude. Fernand therefore went off to the army, with hope in his heart, and Mercedes was now left alone. She could be seen, bathed in tears, wandering incessantly round the little village of the Catalans. At times she would stand under the fierce midday sun, as motionless and dumb as a statue, with her eyes fixed on Marseille. At other times she would sit on the beach, listening to the moaning of the sea, as eternal as her grief, and ask herself whether it would not be better to leap down into the abyss below than to suffer this cruel alternative of hopeless suspense. She did not lack the courage to do this deed. It was her religion that came to her aid and saved her from suicide. Welcome in, Mukia. I hope you're doing well. I enjoyed your ASMR last night. It helped me fall asleep. Thank you. Well, it's in my head. Um, Valis or Manama, depending on who's here. Can I get a shout out from Mukia when you have a chance, please? As for old Dantes, he had now lost all hope. 5 months after he had been separated from his son, and almost at the very hour in which he had been arrested, the old man breathed his last in Mercedes' arms. Monsieur Morel paid the expenses of the funeral and the small debts the old man had incurred during his last illness. Well, when in Rome. So, if you're not familiar with Mukia already, I did. I am fast, like the wind. If you're not already familiar with Mukia, Mukia Viti is an incredible siren, zombie, sea creature goddess, really, who does reading and games and ASMR, and is just a well-rounded, super kind, generous, sweet woman. And if you're not already following Mukia, you're missing out. So check her out when you get a chance and give her a follow. At other times, she would sit on the beach listening to the moaning of the sea, as eternal as her grief, and ask herself whether it would not be better to leap down into the abyss below than to suffer this cruel alternative of hopeless suspense. She did not lack the courage to do this deed. It was her religion that came to her aid and saved her from suicide. As for old Dantes, he had now lost all hope. 5 months after he had been separated from his son, and almost at the very hour at which he had been arrested, the old man breathed his last in Mercedes' arms. Monsieur Morel paid the expenses of the funeral and the small debts the old man had incurred during his last illness. It required more than benevolence to do this. It required courage. The South was aflame, and to help the father of a Bonapartist as dangerous as Dantes, even though he were on his deathbed, was a crime. Ooh la la. So, Edmund, imprisoned, Mercedes, grief-stricken, Fernand, off in the military because he believes that he secured the love and affection of Mercedes. Danglars has gone off to be, I think it was a Spanish merchant. What was it? Condruso. I'm totally butchering his name. He's probably just living his life. De Villefort is um, playing both sides to come out on top, I guess. I don't know. And his poor dad passing away. All right, we are at a good stopping point, and as I said before, we have what? Ba 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 ba. We are on chapter 12 of the 16 I will read today. So, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and when I come back, we shall continue where we left off with chapter 12. So, be sure to use the restroom, hydrate, caffeinate, do whatever you need to make sure you are taking care of yourselves, as all I can do is
Hydrate
read
before
to
you dihydrate.
You got it, Valis. Also, I reworked all of my alerts so that way so that way they will fit within the shape of I guess the page. So I think it looks quite nice. Very sharp. I might make them smaller, the words smaller. I haven't decided yet. Either way, I will be back shortly, everyone. Hang tight. We'll be back after this ad break. Hello. Do. I have returned. Victorious, hopefully. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. We are back. And which means more reading, my dear viewers. Let's see. We are on to chapter 12. Yes. Yes, we are. So buckle up. Let's start chapter 12. Chapter 12, Numbers 34 and 27. Hi, Crutch. I hope you're doing well. I didn't even whisper, I hope you're doing well. Dante's passed through all the various stages of misery that affects a forgotten and forsaken prisoner in his cell. First, there was pride born of hope and consciousness of his innocence. Next, he was so reduced that he began to doubt his innocence. Finally, his pride gave way to entreaty. Yet it was not God he prayed to, for that is the last resource, but man. The wretched and miserable should turn to their Savior first. Yet they do not hope in him until all other hope is exhausted. Dantes begged to be taken from his dungeon and placed in another one, even though that were deeper and darker. Even a change for the worse would be welcome and would give him a few days' distraction. He entreated his gaolers to let him go for a walk, to give him books, anything to while away the time. One day he entreated his gaoler to ask for a companion for him. The gaoler passed the request of prisoner number 34 to the proper quarter. But the governor, being as prudent as a politician, imagined that Dantes would stir up the prisoners to mutiny, weave some plot, or make an attempt to escape. So he refused. Dantes had now exhausted all human resources and turned toward God. All the pious thoughts which are sown broadcast in the human field, and which are gleaned by the victims of a cruel fate, came to comfort him. He recalled the prayers taught him by his mother, and discovered in them a hidden meaning hitherto unknown to him. To the happy and prosperous man, prayer is but a meaningless jumble of words until grief comes to explain to the unfortunate wretch the sublime language which is our means of communication with God. I'm doing well, silent somebody. I hope you're doing well too. In spite of his prayers, however, Dantes still remained a prisoner. His gloom gave way to wrath. He began to roar out blasphemies, which made even his gaoler recoil with horror, and dashed himself in a paroxysm of fury against the walls of the prison. Then there recurred to his mind the informer's letter which Villefort had shown him. Each line of it was reflected on the walls in fiery letters. He told himself it was the hatred of men and not the vengeance of God that had thrust him into this dark abyss. He doomed these unknown men to the most cruel torments. His fiery imagination was capable of conjuring. He doomed these unknown men to the most cruel torments his fiery imagination was capable of conjuring up. But even so, the most awful of these torments seemed to him too mild and too short for them. For after the torment would come death, and in death they would find, if not repose, at all events, that insensibility which to so nearly resembles repose. Sometimes, he said to himself, when I was still a man, strong and free, commanding other men, I have seen the heavens open, the sea rage and foam, the storm rise in a patch of sky, and like a gigantic eagle beat the two horizons with its wings. When I felt that my ship was but a weak refuge from the tempest, for did it not shiver and shake like a feather in the hand of a giant? Soon the sight of the sharp rocks, coupled with the frightful noise of the waves, announced to me that death was near, and death terrified me. I exerted all my efforts to escape, and I combined all my man's strength with all my sailor's skills in that terrible fight against God. For to me life was happy then, and to escape from the jaws of death was to return to happiness. I had no use for death. I loathed the thought of sleeping my last sleep on a bed of hard rocks and seaweed, or of serving after my death as food for gulls and vultures. I, who was made in the image of God. Now, however, it is quite a different matter. I have lost all that bound me to life. Now, death smiles on me as a nurse smiles on the child she is about to rock to sleep. Now, welcome, death. No sooner had this idea taken possession of the unhappy young man than he became more calm and resigned. He felt more contented with his hard bed and black bread, ate less, slept not at all, and almost found his miserable existence unsupportable? His miserable existence supportable, for could he not cast it off at will as one casts off old clothes? There were two ways of dying open to him. One was quite simple. It was only a question of tying his handkerchief to a bar of the window and hanging himself. The other way was by starving himself. Hanging seemed to him a disgraceful thing, so he decided upon the second course. Nearly 4 years had passed since he had taken this resolution. At the end of the second year he ceased to count the days. Dantes had said to himself, I will die, and had chosen his mode of death. He had weighed the matter well, but being afraid he might go back on his resolution, he had sworn to himself that he would starve himself to death. When the gaoler brings me my food in the morning and evening, he said to himself, I shall throw it through the window, and he will think I have eaten it. He kept his word. At first he threw it away with pleasure, then with deliberation, and finally with regret. It was only the remembrance of his oath that gave him the strength to carry out this dreadful purpose. The food which he had once loathed, hunger now made pleasant to the eye and delicious to the smell. At times, he would hold his plate in his hand for an hour, his eyes fixed on the morsel of putrid meat or tainted fish and the black and moldy bread. It was the last instincts of life struggling within him and breaking down his resolution. At length came the day when he had no longer the strength to raise himself to throw his supper away. The next day he could no longer see and scarcely hear. The gaoler thought he was seriously ill. All at once, toward 9 in the evening, just as he was hoping that death would come soon, Dantes heard a dull sound on the wall against which he was lying. So many loathsome animals had made their noises in his cell, that little by little he had grown accustomed to them and did not let them disturb his sleep. This time, however, whether it was that his senses had become intensified by his long abstinence, or that the noise was louder or more significant than usual, Edmund raised his head to hear better, and what he heard was an even scraping noise, as though caused by an enormous claw, a powerful tooth, or the pressure of some sharp instrument on the stone. Welcome in. Thank you for the lurk. Though weakened, the young man's brain seized on the idea that is ever present to the mind of a prisoner: liberty. The noise lasted for about three hours. Then Edmund heard the sound of something crumbling away, and all was silence again. Some hours later, the scraping was continued again, but this time louder and nearer. Edmund's interest was aroused, and the noise seemed almost like a companion to him, as it continues even in daylight. He thought to himself, it must be some unfortunate prisoner trying to escape. Oh, if I were only near and could help him! But I must ascertain this. I have only to knock on the wall, and if it is an ordinary workman, he will instantly cease working and will endeavor to discover who it is that knocks, and why he knocks, and then, as his work is lawful, he will soon resume it. If, on the contrary, it is a prisoner, the noise I make will alarm him. He will be afraid of being discovered. He will cease his work and only resume it at night, when he believes everyone to be in bed and asleep. Edmund went to a corner of the cell, detached a stone that had become loosened with the damp, and knocked 3 times on the wall, just where the sound had been loudest. At the first knock, the noise stopped as if by magic. Edmund listened intently all through that day, but there was a complete silence. "It is a prisoner," Dante said with inexpressible joy. 3 days, 72 deadly hours passed without a repetition of the noise. One evening, however, after the gaoler had paid his last visit, Dantes, who had his ear to the wall, thought he heard an almost imperceptible sound. He moved away, paced round the cell several times to calm himself, and then returned to the same spot. There could be no doubt about it. Something was happening on the other side of the wall. The prisoner had recognized the danger of his previous tactics and had substituted the crowbar for the chisel. Encouraged by this discovery, Edmund resolved to help the untiring worker. He looked round for some object he could use as a tool, but could discover nothing. He had no knife or sharp instrument. The only iron in the cell was that at the windows, and he had already proved the impossibility of moving the bars. He had but one resource, and that was to break his pitcher and use one of the jagged fragments. Accordingly, he dashed the pitcher to the ground, and choosing 2 or 3 of the sharp, broken bits, he hid them under his bed. The others he left scattered about the floor. The breaking of the jug was such a natural accident that it would cause no suspicion. He had the whole night to work in, but groping about in the dark, he did not make much headway, and he soon found that he blunted his instrument against the hard stone. He laid down his tool and waited for the morning. Hope had given him patience. All night long he listened to the unknown miner at his subterranean work. Day came. The gaoler entered. Dantes told him the pitcher had fallen from his hands as he was drinking out of it the previous evening. The gaoler went grumbling to fetch another one without even taking the trouble to pick up the bits of the old one. The grinding of the lock in the door, which had always caused Dantes a pang, now gave him inexpressible joy. He listened for the last of the dying footsteps, and then hastily moving his bed away, he saw, by the faint ray of light that penetrated his cell, how useless had been his work of the previous night in attacking the hard stone instead of the plaster surrounding it. The damp had rendered the plaster friable? Yeah, I'm not sure saying that. Friable. We're going to do a dictionary. Okay. I need somebody to do explanation mark word, please. Frayable, easily crumbled or reduced to powder. Today I learned. So, frayable, frangible, or fragile. Similar. There we go. Today we learned. The damp had rendered the plaster frayable, and Dante's heart beat with joy when he saw it break off in little bits. They were but tiny atoms, it is true, but within half an hour he had scraped away nearly a handful. A mathematician would have calculated that if he worked like that for about 2 years, and if he did not encounter a rock, he might succeed in excavating a passage about 2 feet square and 20 feet deep. In 3 days he managed with untold precautions to lay bare a stone. The wall was made of ashlars, beams made of stone, for the great solidity of which a freestone had been placed at intervals. It was one of these freestones which Dantes had now laid bare, and which he must now dislodge. He used his nails, but they were useless tools. The fragments of the pitcher broke whenever he tried to make them do the duty of a crowbar. After an hour of useless toil, he paused, his forehead bathed in perspiration. Was he to be thus stopped at the beginning? And must he wait inert and useless, while his neighbor, who was perhaps growing weary, should accomplish all? Suddenly an idea occurred to him. He stood up, smiling. The perspiration on his forehead dried. The gaoler always brought him his soup in a tin saucepan with an iron handle. It was this iron handle he longed for, and he would have given 10 years of his life to get it. The contents of the saucepan were always poured into Dante's plate. This he ate with his wooden spoon and washed his plate in readiness for the next day. On the evening in question, Dantes placed his plate on the floor, halfway between the door and the table. When the gaoler entered, he stepped on it and broke it to pieces. This time the gaoler could not blame Dantes. It is true, he should not have left his plate on the floor, but then the gaoler should have looked where he was going. He contented himself with grumbling and looking around for some other vessel for Dante's soup. "Leave the saucepan," the prisoner said. "You can take it again when you bring me my breakfast in the morning." This advice suited the gaoler, as it spared him the necessity of going up and down the many steps again. He left the saucepan. Dantes was trembling with delight. He ate his soup and meat hastily, and then, after waiting an hour, he made sure the gaoler would not change his mind. He set himself to the task of dislodging the freestone, using the saucepan handle as a lever. At the end of an hour, he had extricated the stone, leaving a hole of more than 1.5 feet in diameter. Dantes collected all the plaster very carefully, carried it into the corners of the cell, and with a piece of broken earthenware scraped some of the gray earth from the floor and strewed it over the plaster. He continued to work all night, and at dawn of day replaced the stone, pushed the bed up against the wall, and lay down to sleep. His breakfast consisted of a piece of bread, which the gaoler placed on the table. "Aren't you going to bring me another plate?" Dantes asked. "No, you break everything. First of all, there was your pitcher, and then you made me break your plate. You can keep the saucepan now, and your soup will be poured into that." Dantes lifted up his eyes to heaven, joined his hands under the coverlet, and said a prayer of thanks. The piece of iron which had been left him created in him a feeling of gratitude toward God stronger than any he had felt for the greatest blessings in the past years. He worked all day unremittingly. Thanks to his new instrument, he had scraped out more than 10 handfuls of broken stone, plaster, and cement by the end of the day. He continued working all through the night, but after 2 or 3 hours he encountered an obstacle. The iron did not grip any more. It simply slid off a smooth surface. He touched the obstacle with his hand and soon recognized it as a beam. It crossed or rather blocked the hole that Dantes had commenced. It meant that he had to dig either above or below it. "Oh, my God," he cried. "I prayed so fervently that I hoped thou hadst heard my prayer, my God. After having deprived me of my liberty, after having deprived me of the peace of death, oh, my God, and after calling me back to existence, have pity on me, oh, my God, and let me not die of despair." "Who speaks of God and of despair in the same breath?" said a voice that seemed to come from under the ground and sounded sepulchral. There we go. And sounded sepulchral to the young man. His hair stood on end and he drew back. Side note, a sepulcher is where people inter the dead. So eerie and ghost-like makes sense. "Ah," he murmured, "I hear a man's voice." Edmund had not heard any man's voice but that of his gaoler for the past 4 or 5 years, and to a prisoner a gaoler is not a man, he is but a living door added to his oaken door. He is but a bar of flesh added to his bar of iron. "In heaven's name," Dantes cried out, "speak once more, though the sound of your voice frightened me. Who are you?" "And who are you?" the voice asked. "An unhappy prisoner," replied Dantes, who had no difficulty in answering the question. "What nationality?" "French." "Your name?" "Edmond Dantes." "Your profession?" "A sailor." "How long have you been here?" "Since February 28th, 1815. "Your crime?" "I am innocent of any crime." "But what are you accused of?" "Of having conspired in favor of the Emperor's return." "What? The Emperor's return? Is the Emperor then no longer on the throne?" "He abdicated at Fontainebleau in 1814 and was banished to the Isle of Elba. How long have you been here that you do not know this?" "Since 1811. Edmund shuddered. This man had been in prison 4 years longer than himself. "Dig no more," the voice continued, speaking quicker. "Tell me only at what height your hole is." "On level with the door." "How is it concealed?" "It is behind my bed." "Where does your room lead to?" "To the passage, and the passage to the courtyard." "Alas, alas," muttered the voice. Oh my God, what is the matter? Dantes cried out. Only that I have made a mistake, that the inaccuracy of my plans has misled me, that the lack of a compass has ruined all, that one wrong line of my plan is equivalent to 15 feet, and that what I believe to be the wall of the fortress is the wall you have been digging. But in any case, the fortress would only give you access to the sea. That is what I desired. And if you had succeeded, I should have thrown myself into the sea, swum to one of the islands round the Chateau d'If, or even to the shore, and then I should have been saved. Now all is lost. Fill in your hole again very carefully. Work no more, and wait till you hear from me again. Tell me at least who you are. I am number 27. Ah, you surely mistrust me, cried Dantes. I swear by the living God that I will not betray you. Do not forsake me. You will not leave me alone any more, will you? Come to me, or else let me come to you. We will escape together, and if we cannot escape, we will talk together. You of those you love, and
Hi.
I of those I love. You must love someone. Welcome in, Apache Bro. I am all alone in the world. Then you will learn to love me. If you are young, I shall be your companion. If you are old, I shall be your son. I have a father who must be 70 years of age if he is still alive. I love but him and a girl named Mercedes. I know that my father has not forgotten me, but who knows whether she still thinks of me. I will love you as I loved my father. So be it, said the prisoner. Farewell till tomorrow. From this moment, Dante's happiness knew no bounds. He was not going to be alone any more, and perhaps he might even gain his freedom. Anyway, even if he remained a prisoner, he would have a companion, and captivity shared with another is but half captivity. He walked up and down his cell all day long, his heart beating wildly with joy. At moments it almost seemed to choke him. At the least sound he heard, he sprang to the door. Once or twice he was seized with the fear that they would separate him from this man, whom he knew not, but whom he already loved as a friend. Night came. Dantes thought his neighbor would take advantage of the silence and the darkness to renew conversation with him, but he was mistaken. The night passed without a single sound breaking in upon his feverish waiting, but the next morning, after the gaoler had been, he heard 3 knocks at equal intervals. He threw himself upon his knees. "Is that you?" he said. "Here I am." "Has your gaoler gone?" inquired the voice. "Yes," replied Dantes, "and he will not come again till this evening. So we have got 12 hours of freedom." "I can set to work then." "Oh, yes, yes, without delay. This very instant, I beg of you." The piece of earth on which Dantes was leaning suddenly gave way. He threw himself back, and a mass of earth, loose stones, crumbled into a hole which opened up just beneath the aperture he himself had made. Then, from the bottom of this hole, of which he could not gauge the depth, he saw a head appear, then a pair of shoulders, and finally the body of a man who crept with great agility out of the hole just made. Was he just like quietly scratching the whole night just while he was sleeping and thinking no one was there? That is wild. Mm. So Dante's prisoner 34 and prisoner 27, the man that just came out of the hole. That means in the 4 years between when 27 was interred and Edmund was interred, 7 men. Only 7 men in a 4-year span. This fortress, the Chateau d'If, is literally just to make people disappear. It's kind of fascinating. Let's see. Big stretch. We're between chapters. Big stretch. Whew. Okay. Be sure to stretch, everyone. Hydrate, caffeinate, do whatever you need to stay loose and relaxed and enjoy the story. Okay. So we are on to chapter 13. Chapter 13, An Italian Scholar. Dante threw himself into the arms of his new friend, for whom he had waited so impatiently and so long, and drew him toward the window that the little light that penetrated his cell might reveal his features. His new-found friend was short, with hair blanched with suffering rather than with age. His keen, penetrating eyes were almost hidden beneath thick, gray eyebrows, and his beard, which was still black, reached down to his chest, his thin face furrowed with deep lines, and the bold outlines of his characteristic features revealed a man who was more accustomed to exercise his mental faculties than his physical strength. Large drops of perspiration stood on his brow, and as for his garments, it was impossible to distinguish their original form, for they were in rags. He appeared at least 65 years of age, but the agility of his movements seemed to imply that this aged appearance was due to long captivity. He received the young man's enthusiastic outbursts with a certain pleasure. His icy soul seemed to gather warmth for an instant and to melt in the contact with his ardent youth. He thanked him with much feeling for his cordiality, though his disappointment had been very bitter at finding another dungeon where he had hoped to find liberty. Now let us see whether we can conceal from the eyes of your gaolers all traces of my entrance, said the newcomer, and stooping down to the aperture, he lifted the stone with the greatest ease, in spite of its weight, and fitted it into the hole. This stone has been removed very carelessly, he said, shaking his head. Hadn't you any tools? Have you any? Dantes asked with astonishment. I made some. With the exception of a file, I have all I need, chisel, pincers, crowbar. Oh, I should like to see these products of your patience and industry. Well, to begin with, here is my chisel. And he showed Dantes a sharp, strong blade with a handle of beechwood. How did you make that? Asked Dantes. Out of one of the clamps of my bed, I have hollowed out the passage, a distance of about 50 feet with this instrument. To think that all my work has been in vain. There is now no means of escape. God's will be done. Dantes looked with astonishment mingled with admiration at this man who renounced with such philosophy a hope cherished for so long. Welcome in, Fallen. I hope you're enjoying your dinner. Now, Dante said, will you tell me who you are? Yes, if it interests you. Then he continued sadly, I am the Abbé Feria, a prisoner in the Chateau d'If since 1811, and previously imprisoned in the fortress of Fenestrella for 3 years. In the year 1811, I was transferred from Piedmont to France. It was then that I learned the god of destiny, who at the time seemed subservient to Napoleon's every wish, and had given him a son, and that, while still in its cradle, the child had been named King of Rome. Little did I think then that this Superman would be overthrown. But why are you here at all? Because in 1807, I mediated the very scheme. I mediated the very scheme that Napoleon tried to realize in 1811, because, like Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli secretary of the Florentine Republic and author of The Prince, I desired I desired to say hello. Hello, Grimlock.
Raggy just followed.
Thank you for the follow. Because, like Machiavelli, I desired Italy to be one great, strong, and compact empire, instead of a nest of petty principalities, each with its weak and despotic ruler. Because I thought I had found my Caesar Borgia, who was the son of Pope Alexander VI and ruthless politician, in a crowned fool who pretended to share my views so as the better to betray me. It was the scheme of Alexander VI and Clement VII. It will never materialize now, for their attempt was fruitless, and not even Napoleon had accomplished it. There is no doubt Italy is an accursed country. For a moment Dante stood motionless and mute. Then you abandon all hope of escaping, he said at last. I realize that it is impossible, and that it is a tantamount to revolting against God to attempt what is contrary to his designs. Why despair? Why not start afresh? Start afresh? Ah, you little know how I have toiled. Do you know that it took me 4 years to make my tools? Do you know that for the past 2 years I've been scraping and digging out earth as hard as granite? I have had to move stones that I once thought impossible to loosen. I have spent whole days in these titanic efforts, and there were times when I was overjoyed if by night time I had scraped away a square inch of cement that age had made as hard as the stones themselves. I have had to pierce the wall of a staircase so that I could deposit all my stones and earth in it as well, in its well, and I thought I had almost finished my task, and felt I had enough strength left to accomplish it, when I found that all my plans were frustrated. I assure you, I have known very few successful attempts to escape. Only those who have been crowned with success, which were planned and worked out with infinite patience. We shall do best now to wait till some unforeseen occurrence gives us the opportunity of making our escape. When such an opportunity occurs, we will seize it. Thank you for the lurk. Enjoy the story. You could well wait, Dante said with a sigh. Your work occupied every minute of your time, and when you could not work, you had your hope in a brighter future to console you. I accomplished other things besides all this. What did you do? I wrote or studied. Who gave you paper, pens, and ink? No one, said the abbé. I made them myself. Dantes looked at the man with admiration. Only he could scarcely credit all he told him. Faria noticed the shade of doubt on the young man's face and said, When you come to my cell, I will show you an entire volume entitled Treatise on the Possibility of a General Monarchy in Italy, which is the result of the thoughts, reflections, and researches of my whole life, ideas which I have worked out in the shadow of the Colosseum at Rome, at the foot of St. Mark's column at Venice, or on the banks of the Arno at Florence. Do you mean to say you have written it? On 2 shirts. I have invented a preparation by means of which linen is rendered as smooth and glossy as parchment. I have also made some excellent quills which everyone would prefer to the ordinary ones, if once they were known. I made them from the cartilage of the head of those enormous whiting they sometimes give us on fast days. I made them from the cartilage of the head of those enormous whiting they sometimes give us on fast days. What is a whiting? Whiting? Is that a fish? We're gonna find out what a whiting is. It's a fish. It is a fish. "'Tis but a fish." Oh, very unattractive looking fish. Fascinating. Science. A long, narrow, silvery Pacific whiting fish on the sandy floor. Pacific fish? Hold on. The logistics of that confuse me. Because they're in France, which is the Atlantic. So how would they be getting a Pacific fish? Well, whatever. It's 200-year-old story. It's fine. I'm just not going to get in the nitty gritty of it. I made them from the cartilage of the head of those enormous whiting they sometimes give us on fast days. Formerly, there must have been a fireplace in my cell, which was doubtless closed up some time before I came. It must have been used for very many years, for the interior was coated with soot. I dissolved some soot in a portion of the wine they bring me every Sunday, and my ink was made. For notes to which I wished to draw special attention, I pricked my finger and wrote with my blood. "When can I see all this?" Dantes asked. "As soon as you like." "Let it be at once, then," the young man exclaimed. "Then follow me." So saying, the abbé re-entered the subterranean passage and disappeared. Dantes followed, and found himself at the far end of the passage, into which the abbé's door opened. Here the passage became narrower. Indeed, there was scarcely room for a man to crawl through on his hands and knees. The abbé's room was paved. It had been by raising one of the flagstones in the darkest corner of the room that he had commenced the laborious task of which Dantes witnessed the completion. As soon as he entered the cell, the young man examined it very carefully. But at first sight it presented nothing out of the ordinary. "And now I am very anxious to see your treasures," Dantes said. The abbé went toward the fireplace, removed a stone which was formerly the hearthstone, and which hid a fairly deep cavity. "What do you wish to see first? Show me your work on the monarchy of Italy." Varia took from his cupboard 3 or 4 rolls of linen, 4 inches wide and 18 long, which were folded like papyrus leaves. These strips of linen were numbered and covered with writing. "Here you have the whole of it," he said. "I put the words 'Finis' at the bottom of the 78th strip just a week ago. I have used for it 2 of my shirts and all the handkerchiefs I had. If ever I gain my liberty and can find a publisher in Italy who will publish it, my reputation is made." He then showed Dantes the quills he had made, the pen-knife of which he was particularly proud, and which he had made out of an old iron candlestick, the ink, the matches, the sulphur for which he had obtained by feigning a skin disease, the rope ladder, the material for which he had obtained by unraveling the ends of his sheets, and finally the needle. On seeing these ingenious products of an intelligent and highly developed brain, Dantes became thoughtful, and it occurred to him that the man might be able to clear up the mystery surrounding his own misfortune, which he himself had been unable to fathom. "What are you thinking of?" the abbé asked with a smile, seeing his companion's pensiveness, and attributing it to inexpressible admiration. "I was thinking that though you have related to me the events of your life, yet you know nothing of mine." Hmm. "Your life, young man, is far too short to contain anything of importance. Nevertheless, it contains a great misfortune," said Dantes, "a misfortune that I do not deserve." "And I would rather attribute the authorship of it to mankind and no longer blaspheme God as I have hitherto done." "Tell me your story, then." Dantes then related what he called the story of his life, consisting of a voyage to India, 2 or 3 voyages to the East, and finally his last voyage, the death of Captain Leclerc, the package confided to him from the Grand Marechal, the letter given him by the latter addressed to a certain Monsieur Noirtier. Then he went on to tell his friend of his arrival at Marseilles, his interview with his father, his love for Mercedes, his betrothal feast, his arrest, his examination, his temporary imprisonment in the law courts, and finally his permanent imprisonment in the Chateau d'If. After this he knew nothing more, not even how long he had been a prisoner. When Dantes had finished his story, the Abbé sat silent, deep in thought. After a time he said, "There is a maxim with a very deep meaning which says, if you wish to discover the author of a crime, endeavor to find out who in the first place would derive advantage from the crime committed." You were about to be nominated captain and also to marry a beautiful girl, were you not? That is true. Was it to anyone's interest that you should not be appointed captain of the Pharaon? And again, was it anyone's interest that you should not marry Mercedes? Answer the first question. Order is the key to all problems. I was very popular on board. If the sailors could have chosen their chief, I am sure they would have chosen me. There was only one person who had any reason to wish me ill. I quarreled with him some time ago and challenged him to a duel, but he refused. Now, we are coming to the point. What was this man's name? Danglars, the purser of the ship. Had you been appointed captain, would you have retained him as such? Not if it had depended on me, for I thought I had noticed some inaccuracies in his accounts. Good. Now, who was present at your last conversation with Captain Leclerc? No one. We were alone. Could anyone have overheard your conversation? Yes, the door was open, and... Wait. Yes, it is true, Danglars passed at the very moment Captain Leclerc was handing me the package for the Grand Marechal. Better still. Now we are on the right track. Did you take anyone ashore when you put in at the Isle of Elba? No one at all. What did you do with the letter the Grand Marechal gave you? I put it in my portfolio. Had you your portfolio with you then? How could a portfolio large enough to contain an official letter find room in a sailor's pocket? My portfolio was on board. So, you did not put the letter into the portfolio until you returned to the ship? No. What did you do with the letter from the time you left Porto Ferrajo till you reached the ship? I carried it in my hand. So that when you went on board, everyone could see that you carried a letter. Yes. Danglars as well? Yes, Danglars as well as the others. Now listen to me, and try to recall all the incidents. Do you remember how the denunciation was phrased? Oh, yes, I read it over 3 times, and each word is engraved on my memory, and he repeated it word for word. The abbé shrugged his shoulders. It is as clear as daylight, he said. You must have a very noble heart and simple mind that you had not your suspicions from the very outset. Do you really think so? Dantes exclaimed. Such infamy is not possible. How did Danglars usually write? He had a good round hand. How was the anonymous letter written? With a backward slant. The abbé smiled. I suppose it was a disguised hand. It was too bold to be disguised. 'Twas me, noble, I don't know about that. Perhaps. The abbé took one of his quills and wrote the first 2 or 3 lines of the denunciation on a piece of prepared linen. Dantes stood aghast and looked at the abbé in terror, exclaimed, "How extraordinary alike the 2 writings are!" The simple explanation is that the denunciation was written with the left hand. I have noticed that whereas handwritings written with the right hand vary, those written with the left hand are nearly always alike. nearly always like. Now let us pass to the second question. Was it to anyone's interest that you should not marry Mercedes? Yes. There was a young man who loved her, a young Catalan named Fernand. Do you think he would be capable of writing the letter? No, he would rather have stuck his knife into me. Besides, he was ignorant of the details stated in the denunciation. I had not mentioned them to anyone. Stay a moment. Did Danglars know Fernand? No. Oh, yes. I remember now. On the eve of my betrothal, I saw them together in old Pamphile's tavern. Danglars was friendly and jocular, but Fernand looked pale and agitated. A tailor named Caderousse, whom I know very well, was with them. He was quite drunk, though. Do you want to know something else? Asked the abbe, laughing. Yes, since you seem to be able to fathom every mystery, tell me, why was I only submitted to one examination, why I was condemned without trial? This is a more serious matter, was the reply. What we have just done for your two friends is mere child's play by comparison. You must give me the most precise details. Who examined you? The deputy. Did you tell him everything? Yes, everything. Did his manner toward you change at all in the course of the examination? He certainly did appear disturbed when he read the compromising letter. He seemed quite upset at my misfortune. Are you quite sure he was so perturbed on your account? At any rate, he gave me one great proof of his sympathy. He burnt the letter, my one incriminating document, before my very eyes. Ah, this man may have been a greater scoundrel than you imagine. The deputy's conduct was too sublime to be natural. To whom was the letter addressed? To Monsieur Noirtier, 13 Rue Coq Heron, Paris. Can you think of any selfish motive the deputy might have had in destroying the letter? I do not know of any, but he may have had some reason, for he made me promise 2 or 3 times that, in my own interest, I would not speak to anyone of the letter, and he made me swear that I would not utter the name of the person to whom it was addressed. Noirtier, the abbe repeated. Noirtier. I know a Noirtier at the court of the old Queen of Etruria, a man who was a Girondist during the Revolution. What was the deputy's name? De Villefort? The abbe burst into loud laughter. Dantès looked at him in stupefaction. What is the matter? He said. Only that I have a clear and complete understanding of everything now. Poor, blind young man, this Noirtier was no other than the deputy's father. His father! Dantès cried out. Yes, his father, who styles himself Noirtier de Villefort, the abbe replied. Dantès now began to see clearly, and many details which had been incomprehensible to him up to this moment now began to assume their real significance. Villefort's change of demeanor during the examination, the burning of the letter, the exacted oath, the magistrate's almost supplicating voice, which seemed to implore rather than to threaten, all passed through his mind. A cry broke from his lips, and he staggered like a drunken man. Then, rushing toward the opening which led to his cell, he called out, "I must be alone to think this over." Reaching his cell, he fell on his bed, and here the turnkey found him in the evening, motionless, his eyes staring into space, his features drawn. During these hours of meditation, which had passed like so many seconds, he had formed a terrible resolution and taken a fearful oath. At length a voice roused him from his reverie. It was the voice of Faria, who had come to invite Dantès to have his supper with him. The young man followed him. His face had lost that drawn look it had worn, and instead there was a determined, almost radiant expression, which clearly denoted that he had taken a resolution. The abbe looked at him attentively. I almost regret having helped you in your researches, and having told you what I did, he said. Why? Because I have instilled into your heart a feeling that previously held no place there. Vengeance. Dante smiled and said, "Let us speak of something else." The abbe, the abbé, the abbe, the abbe looked at him again and shook his head sadly. But he did not. But he did what his companion asked. What his companion asked him, and spoke of other matters. Dantes listened to his words with admiring attention. At first he spoke of things and ideas of which the young man had no comprehension until later on. Like the aurora borealis, which lights the navigator of the northern seas on his way, he showed the young man new landscapes and horizons illuminated by fantastic lights. And Dantes realized what happiness it would bring to an intelligent being to follow this exalted mind. To
Hydrate
those
before you
moral...
dihydrate.
You got it, silly. Dantes realized that happiness would bring to an intelligent being to follow his exalted mind. To those moral, philosophical, or social heights to which he was wont to soar. You must impart to me a little of your knowledge, Dante said. Otherwise, an ignoramus like myself will only be a bore to you. I'm silly. No, you're silly. You must impart to me a little of your knowledge. Dante said, otherwise an ignoramus. I'm pretty sure anyone that can use the word ignoramus without flinching is far from an idiot, far from being stupid. Perhaps not well read, but he knew how to use the word. Sweet and spicy, literally. Oh. Enjoy your game. And say hi to your sister for me. Otherwise, an ignoramus like myself will only be a bore to you. I am sure that you must prefer solitude to a companion without education such as I am. If you do what I ask, I promise to speak no more of escaping. Alas, my good friend, said the abbé, smiling, human knowledge is very limited, and when I have taught you mathematics, physics, history, and the 3 or 4 living languages I speak, you will know all that I know. It will not take more than 2 years to give you the knowledge I possess. 2 years, exclaimed Dantes. Do you really think you can teach me all these things in 2 years? What will you teach first? I am anxious to begin. I am thirsting for knowledge. That selfsame evening the 2 prisoners drew up a plan for the younger man's education, and began to put it into execution the next day. Dantes had a prodigious memory and a great facility for assimilation. The mathematical turn of his mind gave him aptitude for all kinds of calculation, while the sense of poetry that is in every sailor gave life to dryness of figures and severity of lines. Whether it was that the distraction afforded him by his study had taken the place of liberty, or because he adhered strictly to the promise given to the abbé, he made no further reference to escaping, and the days passed rapidly, each day adding to his store of knowledge. At the end of the year he was a different man. Dantes noticed, however, that in spite of his companionship, the Abbé Faria seemed to lose some of his animation with each succeeding day. It seemed as though there was something on his mind. At times he would become wrapped in thought, sigh unconsciously, then suddenly rise, and with his arms crossed over his breast, gloomily pace his cell. One day, all at once, he ceased his incessant wandering, and exclaimed, If only there were no sentry. Have you found a means of escape, then? Asked Dantes excitedly. Yes, provided that the sentry in the gallery is both deaf and blind. He shall be deaf and he shall be blind, answered the young man in such a determined way that it frightened the abbe. No, no, he cried, I will have no bloodshed. Dantes wanted to pursue the subject, but the abbe shook his head and refused to answer any more questions. 3 months passed. Are you strong? The abbe one day asked Dantes. Without replying, Dantes picked up the chisel, bent it in the shape of a horseshoe, and straightened it out again. Will you promise not to kill the sentry except as a last resource? Yes, on my honor. Then we may accomplish our task, was the reply. How long will it be before we can accomplish it? At least a year. Shall we begin at once? Without any delay. Here is my plan. The abbe showed Dantes a drawing he had made. It was a plan of his own cell, that of Dantes, and the passage joining them. Welcome in, Winif. In the middle of this passage, they would bore a tunnel, like those used in mines. The tunnel would lead the prisoners under the gallery, where the sentry was on duty. Arrived there, a large excavation would be made by loosening one of the flagstones with which the floor of the gallery was paved. At a given moment, the stone would give way under the soldier's weight, and he would disappear into the excavation below. Dantes would throw himself upon him before he had recovered from the shock of the fall, and while he was still unable to defend himself, he would gag and blindfold him. And then the 2 prisoners would jump through one of the windows, climb down the outside wall by means of the rope ladder the abbe had made, and would be saved. Dantes clapped his hands, and his eyes shone with joy. It was such a simple plan that it was bound to succeed. That same day, the 2 miners commenced operations with renewed vigor after their long rest. Oh dear. Allie, welcome in. Hello, Raiders. The frogs are hopping in. Heck yeah. So Allie, she is a lovely, cozy game streamer, little frog VTuber. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Thank you, Allie, for bringing your community in to visit me. That's so kind. You were playing Warframe. Oh, I have a few other friends that play Warframe. It's really wonderful to watch. I don't understand at all what is happening, but I enjoy watching it. And just pretty colors. Pretty colors, killing robots, I guess. I really don't understand various missions, but it seems really cool. It's a cool game. But let's see. Our latest arrival today. Allie has been traversing the cosmos in Warframe, battling foes with great pride. When not engaged in interstellar combat, she enjoys classic games, art, and MMOs. A true polymath indeed. Yes. So Allie is one of the amazing community members from Underrealm. I met her and a few other folks, actually. Space ninjas hopping and shooting. Accurate. Yes. Well, Allie, thank you for sharing your community with me. And as far as raiders are concerned, hello, my name is VexenCat. I am a tiger librarian VTuber. I read classic literature. Like today, I'm reading The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And occasionally I read poetry and sometimes video games, though rarely, and usually in collaboration with other folks. So, settle in, grab a beverage, grab a blanket, get cozy, and I will continue reading where I left off. All right. To read. At the end of 15 months, the hole was made. The excavation was completed under the gallery, and the 2 prisoners could distinctly hear the measured tread of the sentry. They were obliged to wait for a dark, moonless night for the success of their plans. and their one fear was that the flagstone might give way under the soldiers' heavy tread sooner than they desired. To guard against this, they decided to prop the stone up with a kind of beam they had found in the foundations. Dantes was busy putting it into position when he suddenly heard the abbot cry out in pain. He rushed to him and found him standing in the middle of the room, his face ghastly pale, his hands clenched, and the perspiration streaming down his forehead. "Good heavens!" cried Dantes. Whatever has happened? What ails you? Quick, quick, the abbe replied. Listen to me. Dantes looked at Faria's livid face. His eyes had deep lines under them, his lips were white, and his very hair seemed to stand on end. "Oh, what is the matter with you?" Dantes cried, terror-stricken. "All is over with me. A terrible disease, it may even be mortal, is about to attack me. I feel it coming. I was seized with it the year before my imprisonment. There is only one remedy for it. Run quickly to my cell and raise the foot of my bed. It is hollow, and you will find in a little glass bottle half filled with a red liquid. Bring it to me. No, I might be found here. Help me back to my cell while I still have the strength. Who knows what may happen when the attack lasts?" In a flash, Dantes realized that his hopes of escape were now dashed to the ground. Nevertheless, he did not lose his head. He crept into the tunnel, dragging his luckless companion after him, and with infinite trouble helped him to his cell and placed him on the bed. "Thank you," the abbess said, trembling in every limb, as though he had just stepped out of freezing water. "I am seized with a cataleptic fit. It may be that I shall not move or make a sound. On the other hand, I may stiffen, foam at the mouth, and shriek. Try not to let them hear me, for if they do, they might change my cell, and we should be separated forever. When you see me motionless, cold, and to all appearances dead, then, and not until then, force my teeth apart with a knife, and pour 8 or 10 drops of the liquid down my throat, and I shall perhaps revive." "Perhaps?" exclaimed Dantes, grief-stricken. "Help! Help!" the abbe cried. I am die—" The attack was so sudden and so violent that the unfortunate prisoner was unable to finish the word. His features became distorted, his eyes dilated, his mouth twisted, his cheeks took on a purple hue. He struggled, foamed at the mouth, moaned and groaned. This lasted for 2 hours. Then, stretching himself out in a last convulsion, he became livid and lay as inert as a block of wood, whiter and colder than marble, more crushed than a reed trampled underfoot. Edmund waited until life seemed to have departed from the abbe's body, and he apparently lay cold in death. Then, taking the knife, with great difficulty he forced the blade between the clenched teeth. He carefully poured 10 drops of the red liquid down his friend's throat, and waited. An hour elapsed, and still the abbe made not the slightest movement. Dantes began to fear he had waited too long before administering the remedy, and stood anxiously gazing at him. At last a faint color spread over his cheeks. His eyes, which had remained open in a fixed stare, now began to see. A slight sigh escaped his lips, and he began to move. He is saved! He is saved!" Dantes exclaimed. The abbe could not yet speak, but he pointed with visible anxiety toward the door. Dantes listened and heard the gaoler's footsteps. He jumped up, darted toward the opening which he had entered, replacing the flagstone after him, and regained his cell. An instant later the gaoler entered, and, as usual, found his prisoner sitting on his bed. Scarcely had he turned his back, scarcely had the sound of his footsteps in the passage outside died away, when Dantes, too anxious to eat anything, hastened back to the abbe's cell by the same way he had come a few seconds before. Faria had regained consciousness, but he was still lying stretched on his bed, helpless and inert. "I little thought I should see you again," he said. Why? Asked the young man. Did you think you were going to die? No, but everything is ready for your flight, and I thought you would go. Without you? He exclaimed. Did you really think I was capable of such a base action? I see now that I was mistaken, but alas, I feel very weak and worn. Take courage, your strength will return, said Dantes, seating himself on the bedside and taking the abbé's hands. Faria shook his head. My first fit lasted but half an hour, leaving only a feeling of hunger. I could even get up alone. Today, I can move neither my right leg nor my right arm. My head feels heavy, which proves a rush of blood to the brain. The third attack will leave me entirely paralyzed, or else it will kill me. It seems that our dear Abbe Faria had a stroke. Possibly a heart attack, but I'm leaning, since he's lost movement in his side of his body, I'm going to say it's a stroke, probably. My friend, the old man said, you are, let's see. No, I assure you, you will not die. When you have your third attack, if you have one, you will be at liberty. My friend, the old man said, you are mistaken. The attack I have just had has condemned me to perpetual imprisonment. Before fleeing, one must be able to walk. Well then, we will wait a week, a month, 2 months if necessary. During that time you will gain your strength. All is ready for our escape. We have but to choose the day and hour. The day you feel strong enough to swim, we will put our plan into execution. I shall swim no more, Faria said. My arm is paralyzed, not for 1 day only, but forever. Raise it yourself, and you will soon know by the weight of it. The man did as he was bid, and the arm fell back heavy and lifeless. You are convinced now, I expect, Faria said. Believe me, I know what I am saying. I have thought about it unceasingly, ever since I had the first attack. I have been expecting this, for it runs in the family. My father, as well as my grandfather, died after the third attack. The physician who prepared this medicine for me has predicted the same fate for me. The physician has made a mistake, Dantes cried out. As for your paralysis, that will not trouble me in the least. I shall swim the sea with you on my shoulders. My son, the abbé said, you are a sailor and a swimmer, and should therefore know that a man could not possibly make more than 50 strokes with such a load on his back. I shall stay here till the hour of my deliverance was struck, the hour of my death. But you, my son, flee. Escape. You are young, lithe, strong. Trouble not about me. I give you back your word. Very well, said Dantes. In that case I shall stay here too. Rising and solemnly stretching one hand over the old man, he said, By all that I deem most holy, I swear I shall not leave you till death takes one of us. Faria looked up at this noble-minded, simple young man, and read in the expression on his face, now animated by a feeling of pure devotion, the sincerity of his affection and the loyalty of his oath. So be it, said the sick man. I accept, thank you. Then, holding out to him his hand, he said, It may be that you will be rewarded for this unselfish devotion, but as I cannot leave, and you will not, we must fill in the tunnel under the gallery. The soldier might notice that the particular spot is hollow, and call the inspector's attention to it. We should then be found out and separated. Go, and do it at once. Unfortunately, I cannot help you. Spend the whole night on the task, if necessary, and come to me again in the morning after the gaoler has made his visit. I shall have something important to tell you. Dantes took the abbé's hand and was rewarded with a smile. With a feeling of deep respect, the young man then left his old friend in obedience in his wishes. That was a bit of a longer one. I think we have time for one more. I was hoping to get through 16 as well, but I think we might just be getting through 14. Well, With the linguistic gymnastics I've had to do, I'm not at all surprised. The Italian, the Latin, the French, ugh, ay ay ay. Okay, so we are between chapters. So the best course, of course, the best course, of course, uh, the puns. We shall be sure to stretch all the stretch, and hydrate when necessary.
Before you
Yep,
dihydrate.
hydrating. You got it, Hawk. For those of you not aware, Firehawk P2 is actually going to be debuting in the not so distant future. We played Repo the other day, kind of testing some stuff out. But he is getting his own VTuber made and will be debuting sometime in the near future. And be on the lookout for that. So if you want to help a new VTuber get started, I think they're at like 12 followers now. So check them out. Give them a follow. They're super nice. And I look forward to seeing what content they make. Some of them have been, I was curious. I think there was one chapter that was only 5 pages. There were a couple of other chapters moving forward that are like 4 pages for no apparent reason, but you know, they're it's like the balance, right, of story of this is happening at this time here, and then this is happening at that same time here with very different actors or very different people happening at these 2 separate or 3 potentially, because we had Paris, King Louis, and his staff, and then we have Marseille going on, and then we have the Chateau d'If. All of those are separate storylines that are all converging. True. Okay, so I am getting a little spent. We're going to do one more chapter. Then we're going to go raid. I'm not sure who's out. Hold on, let me check. Let's see. Elden Ring. Hold on. Let's see. Moog is doing some reading and just started, so that might be a good choice. Luca is streaming. Fears to Fathom, Home Alone. Ooh, spooky. Let's see. Ba. Ooh, Archivist. They are chatting and playing Okami. That'll be good. I hope they're doing that later. There's a little bit of Night Rain. There's some Repo. Raven is doing some like artistic friendship bracelets. Blast Phaser is doing Dark Souls. Deus is doing Expedition 33. Megatroid is doing Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Oh, nice. Let's see. Ooh, Agathos is doing Guilty as Sock. That was a cute game. Oh, Neff. Neff has only been streaming a short while. Or, yeah, probably Neff. It looks like he's doing some reading today. That will be good. I think I've rated him recently, but it doesn't matter. We'll check again here in about 15-20 minutes after we finish this chapter. Me. It is a good scary game. Very good. I like scary games. Well, I like watching other people play them. I get scared, and I like them less, for me, personally. But either way, it's still good entertainment, right? That I think if I ever did like one of those subathons or whatever, that would be a very high redeem, let me tell you, for me to play a scary game, because it's just like, I'm scared. Why? Speaking of scary games, David mentioned wanting to play Devour this weekend. So be on the lookout for a scared Vexing Cat in your near future with a David near you. We'll see. If that it gets confirmed and the time gets dialed in, I'll post that on Underrealms, my Discord channel. So anyway, let's read one more chapter and then into the brink of raiding out, shall we? If somebody has something clever to say for a raid message, I wouldn't say no. Just a thought. Chapter 14: The Treasure. The next morning, when Dantes entered the cell of his friend in captivity, he found him sitting up with a resigned expression on his face. In the ray of light which entered his cell by the narrow windows, he held his left hand, the only one he could use now. A piece of paper which, from being continuously rolled up very tightly, had taken on a cylindrical shape. Without saying a word, he showed it to Dantes. "What is this?" the young man asked. "Look at it well," the abbess said, smiling. "This paper, my friend. I can tell you everything now, for I have tried you. This piece of paper is my treasure, half of which belongs to you from this day forward." "Your treasure?" Dantes stammered. Faria smiled. "Yes," he said. "You are a noble-hearted lad, Dantes, but I know by the way you shuddered and turned pale what is passing in your mind. This treasure really exists, and though it has not been my lot to possess it, you will one day be the owner of it all. My friend, your attack has tired you. Will you not rest a little?" said Dantes. "If you wish, I will listen to your story tomorrow. Today, I only want to nurse you back to health. Nothing more, besides," he continued. "A treasure is not a very pressing matter for us just now, is it?" "Very pressing indeed," replied the old man. "How do we know that I shall not be seized with a third attack tomorrow? Or the day after? Remember that then all will be over. Yes, it is true. I have often thought with bitter joy of these riches, which are vast enough to make the fortune of 10 families, and which my persecutors will never enjoy. This has been my vengeance, and in the despair of my captivity I have lived on it during the long nights spent in my dungeon. But now that I have not forgiven them all for love of you, now that I see you full of youth and with a bright future before you, now that I think of all the happiness which will result to you from this disclosure, I tremble at any delay in securing to one so worthy as you the possession of such an enormous buried treasure." Edmund turned away with a deep sigh. "You persist in your incredulity, Edmund." I always struggle with this word. You persist in you persist in your incredulity. Incredulity. Oh God, such a word. Even I struggle. Incredulity. It just feels weird on the tongue. You persist in the fact that it's in right back to back does not help. You persist in your incredulity, Edmund, Faria continued. "I see you must have proofs. Well then, read this paper, which I have not shown to anyone until now. I will not vex him." "Vex mentioned," Dantes said to himself, and taking the paper, half of which was missing, having no doubt been burnt by accident, he read: "This treasure, which may amount to 2 Roman crowns, is the farthest core of the secret opening which declare belongs to him as heir. April 25th, 1498. "Well," said Faria, when the young man had finished reading, "I see nothing here but broken lines and disjointed words. Fire has made it unintelligible." "That may be so to you who are reading it for the first time, but not to me who have toiled over it for many a long night, and reconstructed each phrase and completed each thought. Do you think you have discovered the whole meaning? I am sure of it, but you shall judge for yourself presently. First of all, let me relate the story of the piece of paper." "Hush!" exclaimed Dantes. "I hear footsteps. Someone is
Hi.
coming." "Hey, Carl. Welcome in. Girl Brown is another really cool VTuber. If you guys have not seen their content, they do video games. They do like I guess model building. They were showing off their dinosaur figurine fairly recently. Cool model too. It's like a, I don't know, adventurer meets aviator aesthetic. And I do believe I do not know the type of dinosaur, but I think it's related to a T-Rex. Is the type of VTuber they are. Um, I am I am weak on my dinosaur knowledge, so forgive me. That is not what my particular interest lies, not unless it's in a book. T-Rex. Okay, so you are a T-Rex. That's awesome. So if you guys are not familiar with Grawl, check them out. I should actually do. I need a shout out for mods. When you get a chance, can I get a shout out for Us Curious and a shout out for Grawl when you have a second? Much appreciated. Okay. Do you think you have discovered the whole meaning? I am sure of it, but you shall judge. But you shall judge for yourself presently. First of all, let me relate the story of the piece of paper. Hush! Exclaimed Dantes. I hear footsteps. Someone is coming. I am going. Goodbye. Dantes was very glad thus to escape a story, an explanation, which would only confirm his fear that the attack of catalepsy had deprived his friend of his reason. He stayed in his room all day in order to postpone the terrible moment when he would be quite satisfied that the abbe was mad. But when evening drew on, and Dante still did not make his appearance, not even after the Gowler had paid his customary visit, Faria tried to cover the space between his cell and that of his friend. Edmund shuddered when he heard the painful efforts he made to drag himself along. His leg was lifeless, and he could no longer use his arm. Edmund was compelled to assist him, for alone he would never have been able to get through the narrow opening that led to Dante's cell. Here I am, obstinately resolved on pursuing you, he said, with a kindly smile. You thought to escape my munificence, but it is useless. Now listen to me. Edmund realized that he had to comply, so he placed the old man on the bed while he seated himself on the stool. You know already, the abbot began, and that I was the secretary and intimate friend of Cardinal Spada, the last prince of that name. It is to this worthy lord that I owe all the happiness of my life. He was not rich, although the riches of his family were proverbial, and he lived on the reputation of his wealth. His palace was my paradise. I taught his nephews, but they died, and when he was alone in the world, I made some return for all he had done for me during 10 years by absolute devotion to his every wish. Let's see, grab that real quick. The cardinal's house held no secrets for me. I often saw Monseigneur. Okay, I often saw Monseigneur examining some old books and eagerly searching among family manuscripts. I'm not sure that I have a mod here right now. That's fine. Shout out Oscurious VT. There we go. That should do it. That is not our Oscurious. Is it? I'm so confused. That's weird. Huh. Did I must OSCUR. I added an extra U in there. That's on me. Let me fix it. We'll fix it. There we go. And then we'll do this and Grarl. There we go. Oscurius, like myself, also is a librarian. I think more by trade than by stream. But reading, video watching, intriguing discussions, adventurous spirit, did cooking streams. Excellent, excellent content creator. So if you're not familiar with Oscurius, check them out. Caleb Oscurius is a solid streamer. And then here's one for Grarl, who played, Halo Infinite. Oh man, I haven't played Halo in, well, longer than probably some of you have been alive. Either way, check out Grarl and Oscurius when you have a chance. You know already, the abbot began. Okay, it was a little bit of... Yeah, I'll just read it again. You know already, the abbot began, that I was the secretary and intimate friend of Cardinal Spada, the last prince of that name. It is to this worthy lord that I owe all the happiness of my life. He was not rich, although the riches of his family were proverbial, and he lived on the reputation of his wealth. His palace was my paradise. I taught his nephews, but they died, and when he was alone in the world I made some return for all he had done for me during 10 years by absolute devotion to his every wish. The cardinal's house held no secrets for me. I often saw Monsignor examining some old books and eagerly searching among family manuscripts. One day, when I reproached him with the uselessness of working thus for whole nights together, which alone could account for his low spirits, he looked at me and, smiling bitterly, opened a book which was a history of Rome. There, in the 20th chapter of the life of Pope Alexander VI, I read the following lines which I shall never forget. The great wars of Romagna were ended. Caesar Borgia, who had made his conquest, had need of money with which to buy the whole of Italy. The Pope, too, had need of money to rid himself of Louis XII, King of France, who was still a formidable foe in spite of his recent defeats. It was necessary, therefore, to make some profitable speculation, which was no easy matter in Italy at the time, owing to her impoverished and exhausted condition. His Holiness had an idea. He decided to create 2 new cardinals by choosing 2 of the greatest and, above all, richest personages in Rome. He would make a very profitable speculation. First of all, he could hold up for sale the splendid appointments and offices these 2 cardinals already held. And besides, he expected to realize a large sum by the sale of the 2 hats. There was still a third factor, which we shall come to presently. The Pope and Caesar Borgia found the desired prospective cardinals in John Rospigliosi, who alone held 4 of the highest titles of the Holy See, and Caesar Spada, one of the noblest and richest Romans. They both appreciated such high favor from the Pope, for they were both ambitious. Caesar soon found purchasers for their appointments. The result was the Rospigliosi and Spada paid for the honor of being made cardinals, and 8 other persons paid for the honor of holding the late appointments of the newly created cardinals. 800,000 crowns passed into the coffers of the speculators. It is now time we touched upon the third part of the speculation. The Pope, having overwhelmed Rospigliosi and Spada with favors, having conferred on them the insignia of cardinalate, and feeling sure that they must have realized their fortunes to enable them to pay their very material debt of gratitude, and to establish themselves at Rome, he and Caesar Borgia invited the 2 cardinals to dinner. There now arose a dispute between the Holy Father and his son. Caesar Borgia that you thought that use might be made of one of these expedients, which were always at the disposal of his intimate friends. There was first of all the famous key with which certain people were asked to open a particular cupboard. The key was furnished with a small iron point, due to negligence on the part of the maker. When bringing pressure to bear on this key, for the lock was a difficult one, the person would prick himself with this point, and the next day he would die. Then there was the ring with the lion's head, which Caesar placed on his finger when he shook hands with certain people. The lion bit the favored hand, and at the end of 24 hours the bite proved mortal. Caesar proposed to his father that they should send the cardinals to open the cupboard, or else shake each one heartily by the hand. But Alexander VI replied, "Do not let us begrudge these two worthy cardinals a dinner. Something tells me." Oh, Shin.
Shin Skull just
Hey,
followed.
Shin, welcome in. Rhymes. Shinskull is another skeletal VTuber that plays video games. Super cool. I think I met them through either Bonecaller or possibly Mukia. It's hard to say. Shin is well connected and really cool. You guys should check them out. Spada. Back forth. Do not let us begrudge these two worthy cardinals a dinner. Something tells me we shall get our money back. Besides, you forget that an attack of indigestion declares itself immediately, whereas the results of a prick or bite do not manifest themselves for a day or two. Caesar gave way to this reasoning, and the two cardinals were invited to dinner. The table was laid in a vineyard belonging to the Pope near San Pietro in Vincoli, a charming residence of which the cardinals had often heard. Rospigliosi, overwhelmed. Wow, it's getting easier to say. I think Italian is easier for me to say than French. I don't know why. Rospigliosi, overwhelmed with his new dignity, made all preparations for this new favor. Spada, being a prudent man who only loved his nephew, a hopeful young captain, took paper and pen and wrote his will. He then sent a message to his nephew to meet him near the vineyard, but apparently the messenger did not find him. Spada left for the vineyard near San Pietro in Vincoli at about 2 o'clock. The Pope was awaiting him. The first person Spada saw was his nephew, in full dress, the recipient of marked attentions from Caesar Borgia. Spada turned pale as Caesar cast on him a look full of irony, which seemed to say that he had foreseen everything and had seen to it that the trap was well laid. They went in to dinner. Spada had only been able to ask his nephew whether he had received his message. The nephew answered that he had not. He understood what was meant by this question, but it was too late. He had just drunk a glass of excellent wine, which the Pope's butler had set aside for him. Spada was liberally supplied from another bottle, and an hour later the physician declared they had both been poisoned through eating mushrooms. Spada died on the threshold of the vineyard. His nephew expired at his door while making a sign to his wife which she did not understand. Caesar and the Pope hastened to lay their hands on the heritage on the pretext that they were seeking for the dead man's papers. But the sole heritage was a piece of paper on which were written the words, "I bequeath to my dearly beloved nephew my coffers and my books, amongst which he will find my gold-cornered breviary, and I desire him to keep them in memory of his affectionate uncle." Also, hello, Waldosis. Welcome in. So this, Waldosis is one of the original founders of Underrealm, my VTubing group that I'm a part of. Oh, thank you for the follow. Hey, for those of you not aware, Waldosis is having his Would that be anniversary? Yes, streaming anniversary on Friday the 13th. So on Friday. And what time does that start, Wild? If you can estimate Eastern slash British summertime. But while he types that up, so 8 p.m. British summertime, math, 3 p.m. Eastern math. Okay, so starting 11 a.m. for me. Oh, God, to keep track of all the math. Anyway, so 3 p.m. Eastern, Eastern Daylight Time, EDT, 8 British summertime, he will be hosting his anniversary. So you guys, if you like spooky, scary content, people having fun and being scared, he's got a game show. He's got this incredible D&D campaign on Tuesdays. Honestly, one of the coolest designs for VTuber. Very original, very scary scarecrow, eldritch horror, kind of a lot of things. It gives what is in that what was that vampire TV show that I loved so much when I was younger? It's not Vampire Hunter D, it's the other really cool Helsing. There we go. Yeah, Helsing. It's giving the Helsing vampire, whose name Lestrade? Brain. There's so much going on in my head at any given moment, I can't remember shit. I've got CRS. And you are most welcome. But yeah, I think I could probably sneak in one more shout. Perfect. Good, good. But yes, if you guys are not already following Waldosis from Underrealm, you need to. Great content creator, super cool streams. He is the avatar of terror, the unholy terror of all things gaming. You guys check him out. Gaming, tabletop RPGs. He's gonna read some more horror stuff in the near future. I'm in my last chapter. I can divert a little bit. I'll go back to it. I'll go back to it. All right. I bequeath to my dearly beloved nephew my coffers and my books, amongst which he will find my gold-cornered breviary, and I desire him to keep them in memory of his affectionate uncle. Spada's would-be heirs searched everywhere, admiring the breviary, laid hands on the furniture, and were filled with astonishment that Spada, the rich man, was in reality the most worthless of uncles. There were no treasures, unless one reckoned the works of science in the library and laboratories. Thank you for the follow.
What stories just followed?
There was nothing more. Caesar and his father searched and examined, rummaged amongst the papers, investigated everything, but nothing could they find, or at any rate very little. About 1,000 crowns worth of plate, and about the same value in ready money. Yet before dying, the nephew had had time to say to his wife, "Look among my uncle's papers. There is a will." She searched even more energetically than the august heirs had done, but all was in vain. There was nothing more than 2 palaces and a vineyard, and as at that period real property was of very little value, palaces and vineyards remained in the family as unworthy of the rapacity of the Pope and his son. Months and years rolled on. Alexander VI was poisoned. Caesar was poisoned at the same time, but escaped death by shedding his skin like a snake, assuming a new cuticle on which the poison left spots like those on a tiger's skin. Compelled to leave Rome, he was killed in a nocturnal brawl, almost forgotten by history. After the death of the Pope and the exile of the son, it was generally supposed that the Spada family would resume their splendor of the cardinal's time, but it was not the case. They continued to live in doubtful comfort, and a mystery veiled the whole affair. It was noised abroad that Caesar, who was more politic than his father, had taken the fortunes of the two cardinals from under his father's nose. Do you find do you find my story very stupid? Faria suddenly asked his companion with a smile. Oh no, my friend, returned Dantes. On the contrary, it is as though I were reading a most interesting narrative. Pray continue. I will. Spada's family accustomed themselves to living in obscurity, and the years rolled on. Some of the descendants were soldiers, others diplomats, some entered the church, others became bankers. Some of them grew rich, while others lost all their fortunes. I come now to the last of the family, the Count Spada, to whom I acted as secretary. I felt sure that neither the cardinal's relations nor Borgia had profited by his fortune, and that it had remained ownerless in the bowels of the earth, guarded by some genie. I searched and ransacked everything and everywhere. Thousands of times did I add up the income and expenditure of the family for the past 300 years, but it was all in vain. I remained ignorant, and Count Spada remained poor. My patron died. He bequeathed to me his library. That's a good gift. Just saying. Composed of 5,000 books. His breviary, which had remained in the family, had been handed down from father to son, and in addition 1,000 Roman crowns, with the request that I should have anniversary masses said for the repose of his soul, draw up a genealogical tree, and write a history of his family. All this I carried out most scrupulously. In 1807, a month before my arrest, and 15 days after Count Spada's death, on December the 25th, you will understand presently why the date of this memorable day became fixed in my memory. I was reading for the 1,000th time the papers I was putting in order, for the palace had been sold to a stranger, and I was leaving Rome to settle at Florence, taking with me what money I possessed, my library, and the famous breviary, when, tired with my assiduous study, and rendered drowsy by the heavy dinner I had partaken of, my head fell in my hands, and I dropped off to sleep. This was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh man, I might be able to finish it. I awoke as the clock was striking 6 to find that I was in complete darkness. I rang for a servant to bring me a light, but as no one came, I resolved to help myself. Taking the candle in one hand, I groped about with the other for a piece of paper, which I intended to light at the last flame flickering in the hearth. However, fearing that in the dark I might take a valuable piece of paper, I hesitated, but suddenly recollected that I had seen in the famous breviary which lay on the table beside me an old piece of paper, yellow with age, which had probably served as a bookmark, and had been kept in the same place for centuries by the different owners. I found this useless piece of paper, and putting it to the dying flame, I lighted it. But as the flames devoured the paper I held between my fingers, I saw yellowish characters appear. As if by magic, an unholy terror seized me. I crushed the paper in my hand and choked the flame. Then I lighted the candle, and with inexpressible emotion opened out the crumpled paper. I recognized that a mysterious sympathetic ink had traced these characters, which could only become apparent when placed in contact with heat. A little more than 1/3 of the paper had been consumed by the flames. It was the very paper you read this morning. Read it again, Dantes, and then I will give you the missing words to make the sense complete. So saying, Faria gave Dantes the paper, and he read this time with great eagerness the following words, which had been written with an ink of the color of rust. This 25th day of April, 1498, B. Alexander VI, and fearing that not, he may desire to become my heir, and and Bentivilio, who were poisoned, my sole heir that I have but, and has visited with me that is in Isle of Monte Cristo. All I Els, diamonds, gems, that alone may amount to 2 mil. Will find on raising the 20th row, creek to the east in the straight line, 2 open in these caves, the treasure in the farthest corner, which treasure I bequeath to him and leave in sole heir. Caius, April 25th, 1498. Oh, despite my best efforts, it looks like we are going to have to go on that ad break. I've used up all of my snoozes. It's about that time. Okay, when we return, we will finish this chapter, and as I will raid out after. So, sorry everyone, my dilly-dallying and pontificating between chapters has made today's reading a little longer than anticipated. So, hang tight everyone, we'll be right back after ads. Okay, once more onto the break. So, sorry everyone for having to put you through ads. I try to avoid it as much as possible. I'm doing ads pre-stream, but time got away from me a little bit today, and I have been very verbose. Anyway, welcome back everyone from that, decidedly annoying ad break. Let's see here. We are on the treasure from the Count of Monte Cristo, and now we have read the letter. Now continued the abbe. There we go. Now continued the abbe. Read this other paper. And he gave Dantes a second piece containing the other half of the broken sentences. Ing invited to dinner by his holiness, content to make me pay for my hat. Serve for me the fate of Cardinals Crapara. I declare to my nephew Guido Spada. Read in a spot he knows, the caves of the small, cess in ingots, gold, money, jewel. I know the existence of this treasure, which lie in Roman crowns, and which he, from the small, ings from have been made, ner of the second, tire of him as my, R. Spada. Faria watched him attentively. When he saw that Dantes had read the last line, he said, "Now place the 2 fragments together and judge for yourself." Dantes obeyed and read as follows. This 25th day of April 1498, being invited to dinner by His Holiness Alexander VI, and fearing that, not content to make me pay for my hat, he may desire to become my heir, and reserve for me the fate of Cardinals Crapara and Bentivoglio, who were poisoned, I declare to my nephew, Guido Spada, my sole heir, that I have buried in a spot he knows and has visited with me, that is, in the caves of the small isle of Monte Cristo, all I possess in ingots, gold, money, jewels, diamonds, gems, that alone I know the existence of this treasure, which may amount to about 2 million Roman crowns, and which he will find on raising the 20th rock from the small creek to the east in a straight line. 2 openings have been made in these caves. The treasure is in the farthest corner of the second, which treasure I bequeath to him and leave entire to him as my sole heir, Caesar Spada. April 25, 1498. Well, do you understand now? Faria asked. Then it is the declaration of Cardinal Spada and the will so long sought after. So long sought for, Dantes asked with incredulity. Incredulity. Man, I hate that word. Dantes asked with incredulity. Yes, and 1,000 times yes. Who reconstructed it in this way? I did, with the assistance of the half of the will I had rescued. I worked out the rest by measuring the length of the lines with that of the paper, and by fathoming the missing words by means of those already in my possession. just as in a vault one is guided by a ray of light that enters from above. And what did you do when you thought you had solved the mysterious script? I made up my mind to leave Rome at once, which I did, taking with me the beginning of my big work on the unity of the Kingdom of Italy. The imperial police, however, had been watching me for some time past, and my sudden departure aroused their suspicions. I was arrested just as I was about to embark on Piombino. Now, my dear friend, Faria continued, looking at Dantes with an almost paternal expression, you know as much as I do. If we ever escape together, half of my treasure is yours. If I die here and you escape alone, the whole of it belongs to you. But is there not a more legitimate owner to this treasure than ourselves? Asked Dantes hesitatingly. No, none whatever. You can make your mind easy on that score. The family is completely extinct, and, besides, the last Count Spada made me his heir, in bequeathing the breviary to me, he bequeathed to me all that it contained. No, if we lay our hands on this fortune, we can enjoy it without any compunction. And you say this treasure consists of 2,000,000 Roman crowns and about 13 millions of money in French coin. Edmund thought he was dreaming. He wavered between incredulity. Oh, he just keeps using the word. He wavered between incredulity and joy. I have kept this a secret for you for so long. Secret from you for so long, Faria continued, simply because I wanted to give you proofs, and also because I thought to give you a surprise. Had we escaped before my attack, I should have taken you to Monte Cristo. But now, he added with a sigh, it will be you who will take me. Well, Dantes, are you not going to thank me? This treasure belongs to you alone, my friend, and I have no right to it, Dantes replied. I am not even related to you. You are my son, Dantes, exclaimed the old man. You are the child of my captivity. My profession condemned me to celibacy, but God has sent you to console the man who could not be a father, and the prisoner who could not be a free man. Faria held out his one remaining arm to the young man, who threw himself round his neck and burst into tears. All right, I am a bit spent. Let's see how long this next chapter is. So 115. Chapter 15. Now that this treasure, which had been the object of the abbé's meditations for so long, could give future happiness to him whom he truly loved as a son, it had redoubled its value in his eyes. Daily would he expatiate on the amount, holding forth to Dantes the good a man could do to his friends in modern times with a fortune of 13 or 14 millions. In modern perspective, 13 million doesn't seem like a lot when people have 420 billion, but whatever. The abbé did not know the Isle of Monte Cristo, which was situated 25 miles from Pianosa between Corsica and Elba. But Dantes had often passed it, and had once landed there. He drew a plan of the island, and Faria advised him as to the best means to adopt to recover the treasure. He had kept silent about it for all these many long years, but now it became a daily topic of conversation between the two, fearing that the will might one day be mislaid or lost. He made Dantes learn it by heart until he knew it word for word. Then he destroyed the second part in the firm conviction that even if the first part were discovered and seized, nobody could understand its meaning. Sometimes Faria would spend whole hours giving Dantes instructions what to do against the time he should be a free man. Once free, he was not to lose an hour, not even a minute, before setting out for Monte Cristo. He was to remain alone on the island under some pretext or other, and as soon as he was alone, endeavored to discover the marvelous caves and search the spot designated in the will. In the meantime, the hours passed, if not rapidly, at least not unendurably. One night Edmund woke suddenly and thought he heard someone calling him. He opened his eyes and tried to penetrate the darkness. He heard his name, or rather a plaintive voice trying to articulate his name. He raised himself in his bed and listened, his anxiety bringing great beads of perspiration to his forehead. There could be no doubt the voice came from his companion's cell. Great God, he murmured, could it be? He moved his bed, drew the stone away, and rushed to his friend's cell. There, by the flickering light of the lamp, he beheld the old man clinging to the bedside. His features were drawn with the horrible symptoms which Edmund already knew, and which had filled him with such terror the first time he saw them. "Ah, my friend," Faria said resignedly. "You understand, don't you? There is no need to explain anything. Think only of yourself now. Think only how to make your captivity supportable and your escape possible. It would take you years to achieve unaided what I have done here. In any case, you need have no fear that my cell will remain empty for any length of time. Another unfortunate wretch will soon take my place, and you will be to him an angel of salvation. He may be young, strong, and patient like yourself, and may even help you to escape, whereas I have only been an obstacle. You will no longer have a half-dead body fettered to you to paralyze your every movement. God is decidedly doing you a good turn at last. He is giving you more than he is taking away, and it is quite time for me to die." Edmund could only wring his hands and exclaim, "Oh, my friend, my dearest friend, don't talk like that any more. I saved you once, and I will save you a second time." And raising the foot of the bed, he took the phial, which was still 1/3 full of the liquid, red liquid. "See," he said, "there is still some of this saving draught. Tell me quickly what I am to do this time. Have you any fresh instructions? Speak, my friend, I am all attention." "There is no hope," Faria replied, shaking his head. "Oh, yes, yes," exclaimed Dantes. "I tell you I shall save you." "Try then, if you like. Do as you did the first time, but do not wait so long. If I do not revive after you have administered 12 drops, pour the remaining contents of the phial down my throat. Now carry me to bed. I can no longer stand." Edmund took the old man in his arms, placed him on the bed. "And now, my dear boy," said Faria, "sole consolation of my miserable life, whom heaven sent to me somewhat late in life, yet sent me an invaluable gift for which I am most thankful, at this moment when I must leave you. I wish you all the happiness and prosperity you desire, my son. I give you my blessing." A violent shock checked the old man's speech. Dantes raised his head. He saw his friend's eyes all flecked with crimson, as though a flow of blood had surged up from his chest to his forehead. "Farewell, farewell," the old man murmured, clasping the young man's hand convulsively. "Farewell, forget not Monte Cristo." And with these words he fell back on his bed. The attack was terrible. Convulsed limbs, swollen eyelids, foam mingled with blood, a rigid body was all that remained on this bed of agony in place of the intelligent being that had been there but an instant before. Dantes took the lamp, placed it on a ledge formed by a stone at the head of the bed, whence its flickering light cast a strange and weird reflection on the contoured features and inert, stiff body. With staring eyes, he anxiously awaited the propitious moment of administering the saving draught. When he thought the moment had come, he took the knife, forced apart the teeth, which offered less resistance than on the previous occasion, counted 10 drops, one after the other, and waited. The phial still contained double that quantity. He waited 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, half an hour, and still there was no sign of movement. Trembling in every limb, his hair on end, his forehead bathed in perspiration, he counted the seconds by the beatings of his heart. Then he thought it was time to make the last desperate attempt. He placed the phial in Faria's purple lips. His jaws had remained wide apart, and poured the rest of the liquid down his throat. A violent trembling seized the old man's limbs. His eyes opened and were frightful to behold. He heaved a sigh that sounded like a scream, and then his trembling body gradually reverted to its former rigidity. The face assumed a livid hue, and the light faded out of the wide open eyes. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. Day began to dawn, and its yet feeble gleam invaded the cell, putting to shame the dying light of the lamp. Weird reflections were cast over the face of the corpse, giving it from time to time a lifelike appearance. As long as this struggle between night and day lasted, Dante still doubted, but as soon as the day held its own, he knew that he was alone with a corpse. Then an overmastering terror seized him. He dared press no more the hand that hung down from the bed. He dared look no more on those vacant and staring eyes, which he endeavored in vain to close several times, for they opened again each time. He extinguished the lamp, hid it carefully, and fled from the cell, replacing the stone behind him as carefully as he could. It was time he went too, for the gaoler was coming. Dantes was seized with an indescribable impatience to know what would happen in his unfortunate friend's cell. He therefore went into the subterranean passage, where he arrived in time to hear the turnkey calling for assistance. Other turnkeys soon arrived. Then was heard the tread of soldiers, heavy and measured even when off duty. Behind them came the governor. Edmund heard the bed creaking. He heard, too, the voice of the governor, who ordered water to be thrown on the face of the dead man, and then, as this did not revive him, sent to summon the doctor. The governor left the cell, and some words of compassion mingled with coarse jokes and laughter reached Dante's ears. "Perhaps," said one, "as he is a man of the church, they will go to some expense on his account." "Then he will have the honor of the sack," said another. Edmund listened and did not lose a word of the conversation, though he could not comprehend very much of it. Soon the voices ceased, and it seemed to him they had all left the cell. Still he dared not yet go back. It was possible they left some turnkeys to watch by the dead man. At the end of an hour or so he heard a faint noise which gradually increased. It was the governor coming back with the doctor and several officials. The doctor declared the prisoner dead and diagnosed the cause of death. There was more coming and going, and a few seconds later a sound like the rubbing together of sacking reached Dante's ears. The bed creaked. A heavy step like that of a man lifting a weight resounded on the floor. Then the bed creaked again under the weight placed on it. "Tonight, then," Dantes heard the governor say. Will there be a mass?" asked one of the officials. "That is impossible," replied the governor. "The chaplain asked me yesterday for leave to go to Jerez for a week. The poor abbot should not have been in such a hurry, and then he would have had his requiem." In the meantime, the body was being laid out. "At what o'clock tonight?" asked one of the turnkeys. "Between 10 and 11. Shall we watch by the corpse?" "Whatever for? Lock the door as though he were alive. Nothing more is needed." The footsteps died away. The voices became gradually less distinct. The grating noise of the lock and the creaking of the bolts were heard, and then a silence more penetrating than solitude, the silence of death, prevailed, striking its icy chill through the young man's whole frame. Then he slowly raised the stone with his head and cast a swift glance round the room. It was empty. Dantes entered. And that is the end of that for today. Okay. Good night, everyone. I will see you guys on Friday. And alley-oop, and